My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 501 Diplomatic Storm. Although this was just a guess, in view of the serious consequences of this guess, Delcas sent a secret telegram to Paris that day. The French government was shocked when it received the telegram and immediately asked the military to deduce what France's chances of winning would be if Germany started a war at this time. Everyone, according to our military deduction, if only Germany goes to war with our country on land, our country will have a balance of power with Germany by virtue of the advantage of its 75mm rapid fire gun. If Italy is added, then our country's chance of winning is only 3 levels, and if you add Austria-Hungary into the mix, our country's chances of winning are even lower. At the Prime Minister's office, a French general was telling Prime Minister Rouvier and other cabinet ministers the results of the military's war deduction. For Rouvier, the former finance minister who had just become prime minister, he was faced with such a big problem when he took office, which gave him a very headache. The predecessor Kambula resigned on January 17, 1905 due to the betrayal of the Radical Party and the Socialist Party. However, in the face of this crisis in France, as the Prime Minister of the cabinet, he certainly cannot sit idly by and ignore it. I saw him speaking. Everyone, France is currently in a dangerous state. As the top leaders of the government, we have the responsibility to prevent France from this situation. After setting this tone, Rouvier immediately said to the military representatives attending the meeting, Beto, Camel, your navy and army need to prepare for possible war in advance. Facing the Prime Minister's words, Beto, as the Minister of War, immediately spoke. Prime Minister, our army has already made plans to stop the vacation of officers and soldiers, and the early recruitment of reserves, and militia is proceeding in an orderly manner. The same goes for our navy, which is recruiting reserve officers and soldiers and overhauling warships. The military's preparations in advance are not enough for Rouvier. More importantly, at the diplomatic level, France needs the strength of other countries to at least help France tide over this difficulty. He then said to Trullo, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs on the side, your Ministry of Foreign Affairs needs to contact the United Kingdom and get them to side with us. In addition, Russia should at least keep an eye on Austria-Hungary, send a message to Delcas, and ask it to talk to the Italians, and at least ensure that Italy does not interfere with regarding matters between our country and Germany. It is obvious that Rouvier, as Prime Minister, has a well-organized response, and must have thought about it for a long time. First of all, the British Empire is definitely ranked first on France's demand list, because only the deterrence from the British Empire can make the Germans clear their heads. Of course, if all hopes are pinned on the British, this is certainly impossible. On the one hand, it is whether the British are willing to form a military alliance with Paris at this time. Secondly, if the British Empire is only willing to give verbal support, then the following steps will be needed. The first is ally Russia. Although it has just lost the war and is full of domestic conflicts, it is still useful. Although it is not expected that it can complete the important task of flanking Germany, it should not be a problem to keep an eye on Austria-Hungary. As for the rest, forget about it, unless Nicholas II suddenly feels that he is French, in which case he may have to pray to God for help. After Russia looks after Austria-Hungary, it needs to deal with the thorn in the side of Italy. France has a good card against Italy, Tunisia. Speaking of being at odds with Italy, the main reason is Tunisia, which has caused Italy to make trouble with France everywhere in recent years. Of course, the most uncomfortable thing was the war with the Qing dynasty. With the help of Italy, France lost the face of the great powers. Of course, it is rude to come back without reciprocating. France has also made trouble for Italy, but the effect is not as good as it is now. For the security of France, the Italians must be stabilized, at least not allowed to get involved in disputes with Germany. As Rouvier made countermeasures, the French became busy. In London, the French envoy had a conversation with the British and gained support from the British. Its Prime Minister Bannerman promised that, if a war broke out between France and Germany, the British Empire would side with France. Although the leader of the Liberal Party claimed to support France, regarding France's most urgent military alliance, the British Empire refused to negotiate a military alliance now on the grounds that the conditions were not mature. Although it did not reach the ideal state, Britain guaranteed to stand on France's side, which was a pretty good result. As for Russia, Tsar Nicholas II agreed to France's request to keep Austria-Hungary in check. Of course, they also promised that Russia would support France if a war broke out between Germany and France, but military operations were impossible due to domestic turmoil. After both Britain and Russia achieved good results, the next step was to stabilize the Italians. It's still the same cafe, still two diplomatic professionals. Your Excellency Bacona, our country sincerely wants to discuss the issue of Tunisia with your country, because our country believes that this slightly hostile policy between your two countries is actually not wise at all, even though the two have met many times. Delcas, as the French foreign minister, still finds the Italian foreign minister a bit difficult to deal with. The reason is, here he goes again. Okay, then your country will hand over the protection of Tunisia to our country. Then your country will be our country's true friend, as true a friend as Germany. This is the reason why Mr. Bacona is so difficult to deal with. He only puts forward one condition, which is to give Tunisia to Italy for protection. There is no such thing as accepting death in diplomatic negotiations. He had obtained information about Bacona before. This man could be the foreign minister and be in charge of Italian diplomacy. He can be said to be a very capable person. He cannot have this kind of character, so now the conclusion has been reached. That is, the Italians are confident and have their own reasons for agreeing. Your Excellency Bacona, our country agrees that your country enjoys equal rights with our country in Tunisia. This is already the biggest concession. We also hope that your country will not be overconfident. Bacona showed a hint of embarrassment at Delcas's words. I'm sorry, our country is not interested in this right, so thank you for your kindness. As for Mr. Bacona, who was incompetent, Delcas felt that the other party would not listen to what he said unless he came up with a trump card. Of course, since it is called a trump card, it must not be taken out easily. But now it seems that it can't be hidden anymore. So he thought for a while and then spoke. Actually, our country can understand your country's desire for Tunisia. So if your country is really interested, then we might as well talk about it. Delcas's words made Bacona's eyes flash with a glint. Is this true? Chapter 502 Tensions between Germany and France. The conditions look pretty good. At least half of Tunisia can be obtained. Carlo put down the telegram in his hand and spoke to the Prime Minister. Yes, Your Majesty. This time, thanks to Bacona's hard work and His Majesty's accurate judgment of the situation, our country can obtain half of Tunisia's protection rights without any effort. Antonio is not flattering, but a true reflection of his heart. Because just relying on judgment and some suggestive words, the French obediently offered half of Tunisia. This was something that was really unthinkable, and His Majesty was able to do it. Yes, regarding the negotiations with France, he, the Prime Minister, did not intervene at all. He mainly relied on the Foreign Minister and the Kingdom. However, in the face of the Prime Minister's praise, Carlo waved his hands. Prime Minister, this matter cannot be considered a success. It can only be regarded as a slight regret. We have tried our best, perhaps. The Prime Minister would think that these were humble words from the king, but to Carlo, they were true words that were worth more than real gold. How could Carlo forget the famous Moroccan crisis? Although this crisis was nothing in previous lives, it was a huge event for Europe, because it represented the formation of two major camps in Europe, and the Entente camp and the Alliance camp were established. In his previous life, many people knew about the Moroccan crisis, but not many people had a detailed understanding of it. Carlo still had a deep memory of this period of history, because he debated with others. It was precisely because of this memory that Carlo made a bold plan, based on the current situation and the current situation in Italy, which was to use information asymmetry to deceive the French. However, Considering the confidentiality, only 3 people knew the details of the plan, namely Carlo, the Prime Minister, and the Foreign Secretary. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary were a little confused about Carlo's whimsical plan point. If it weren't for the king's wise and mighty image over the years, I would have thought of finding a doctor for him. So there was some reluctance at first, but as time went by, this unreliable plan became closer and closer to reality. It wasn't until the French were really willing to use Tunisian land as a condition to appease Italy that the two of them were really dumbfounded. That's why the Prime Minister looked at Carlo like he was looking at God. Carlo, who didn't know that he played the role of a sage figure in the minds of the two important ministers, sighed a little when he saw this condition. These French people are really generous. They transferred the protection of Tunisia in the south from Sfax to Gafsa, which is separated from the Libyan province, to Italy as a reward for not using military measures against France. It's a pity that this is the land of the south, not the north. The reason why Carlo sighed so much is that most of Tunisia's arable land is in the north, while the south is dominated by desert and mountain terrain. The few arable lands are concentrated in the narrow coastal strip, which is not much better than in Libya. From an economic perspective, the size of southern Tunisia only accounts for 20% of Tunisia's economic territory. So on the surface, the French gave half of Tunisia's interests to Italy, but in fact they only gave 20% at most. Don't think that this is Italy's disadvantage. You must know how difficult it is to obtain colonies from others in this era, let alone the French who refused to let go. Besides, Italy didn't pay any cost. This was a completely free benefit. How high could it be? As for France, being able to use a small part of Tunisia's interests to tie up Italy is also a very cost-effective deal. At least it can cut out all Germany's allies. Even if there is a worst-case scenario, it will only deal with Germany. Not to mention that there is support from the British on his side, which can at least make the German government think about it. Therefore, after defeating the Italians, France no longer was polite to the Germans and argued with the arguments at the Madrid conference. During this period, the two countries also took frequent actions. Germany began to recruit reserves in June, and France, not to be outdone, also began to mobilize its troops, and then sent additional troops to the German-French border. The French's bold move immediately triggered a serious response from Germany, which also sent its own troops to the border. For a time, millions of troops from both sides gathered on the German-French border. It only took one spark to detonate the situation in Europe. Faced with the tense situation between Germany and France, how can other countries sit still? Britain, Russia, Austria, Italy and other European countries stepped forward to persuade the two countries. As the most important, the British Empire issued a clear warning, requiring the two countries to restrain their armies and avoid the outbreak of military conflict. Of course, in addition to explicit warnings, the British Empire was also a master of secret diplomacy. He first warned Germany not to launch an attack on France at this time, otherwise the British Empire would intervene with arms. Faced with the warning from the British Empire, although the German monarchs and ministers at this time were determined to challenge their status, they were not fools, and were willing to challenge Britain and France at the same time. Therefore, in the face of the British Empire's warning, no one in Germany would take it seriously. For this reason, Navy Minister Tirpitz bluntly told the Kaiser and the government that the German Navy currently does not have enough strength. If a war breaks out, the German Navy will not be able to protect overseas interests. Marshal Tirpitz's attitude represented the thoughts of many Germans at this time. They were afraid of the huge navy of the British Empire. These people are mainly overseas traders and colonial interests, especially in the Philippine colony. Many German companies have investments here. Now is the time when these investments are entering the harvest period, which is why many people have raised objections. Money moves people's hearts, and no one is an exception. One more thing, Germany has now entered the harvest period in the Philippines. Its net financial income reached a new high of 47 million marks in 1904. Becoming German is only profitable overseas colony. Of course, in addition to issuing a warning to the Germans, the French did not have to run away. They were also warned privately by the British Empire and asked them not to provoke the Germans. If the conflict was provoked by the French, the British Empire would remain neutral. Don't think that the British Empire can't see the French people's thoughts and wants. to use the British Empire to solve the German people's thoughts. Do you really think that civilized gentlemen can't see it? The gentlemen of the British Empire had long seen what the French were thinking, so they warned the French not to think about dragging the British Empire into the water. Now point of course, it was not just the British Empire that took action. Other countries also needed to take action, and Italy was no exception. Sorry everyone, there was something going on yesterday, and I didn't update it. I'm sorry. Chapter 503 The Moroccan Crisis Ends. Special Envoy Cabrera, I'm very sorry. Our country's current situation makes it impossible to comply with your country's request. I hope your country can understand. In a secluded room in the palace, Carlo, the King of Italy, expressed his rare apology to a secret envoy. Of course there is a reason why Carlo needs to lower his profile point, because this special envoy Cabrera was a diplomatic envoy secretly sent by Germany. The main purpose is to let Italy make some small moves on the Italian-French border during the confrontation between Germany and France, to attract the attention of the French, and relieve some of the pressure on Germany. Of course, Germany also knows that it is impossible to control people without giving benefits, so it also gives some benefits, that is, giving Italy certain preferential treatment when importing rare coal and iron ore. Faced with the German request and the benefits offered, how could Carlo, who had just reached an agreement with the French, accept it? Therefore, facing the Cabrera envoy, Carlo rejected the German request on the grounds that the current Italian navy and army were too weak and had no ability to cause trouble on the Italian-French border. The reasons given by Carlo are very reasonable and there is no excuse at all, because the Italian navy and army are currently at their weakest in history. In the army, the current total strength of the Italian army is only 193,000, and there is no way it can attack. Not to mention that there are currently more than 2 million square kilometers of land in Italy plus the colonies. There is not even a single soldier in these 10 square kilometers. It is conceivable how much pressure the Italian army is currently under, and it is a kind of powerless one. As for the navy, let alone that, everyone knew last year that all Italy's main warships were sold to the Russians. Now the only one that can take the lead is the Dauntless. If this timeless battleship causes trouble for the French, it can only be said that the Italian navy is in trouble. Some people may say, what are you afraid of? There is still a German navy anyway. The key to the problem is that the German navy is in the North Sea and Italy is in the Mediterranean. Just look at the map and you will know that it is easier to rely on the German navy for rescue than to pray for God to come. As for Italy's long coastline, it would be difficult if the navy did not have the upper hand. Therefore, when neither the navy nor the army has the upper hand, it makes sense for Italy to refuse on the grounds of its own safety. Facing Carlo's series of reasons, Cabrera, as a special envoy, couldn't help but think of the exhortations given by the Prime Minister, the Marquis below, before departure. Cabrera, although the purpose of your visit is very important, it is more important to find out the attitude of the Italians, especially when our country conflicts with France, whether they are willing to stand on our side, even without using military force means, but at least it needs to show this attitude in other ways. So when faced with Carlo's polite refusal, the Cabrera envoy was not discouraged at all. He just said, Your Majesty Carlo, I can understand your country's difficulties, but if your country does nothing, is it inappropriate? Is your country still willing to implement the alliance treaty between our two countries? Regarding the words of Special Envoy Cabrera, Carlo said without hesitation, at this point, please rest assured that the conditions signed between our country and your country will definitely be implemented. As long as your country is attacked by either Russia or France, our country will definitely mobilize its army to join your country in declaring war on it. Carlo also made it very clear that Italy will fulfill its alliance obligations only when it is attacked. As for the signatory country attacking the other party, then I'm sorry and can only remain neutral. Of course, it is very reasonable to sell some supplies that allies need. As a diplomatic envoy, Viscount Cabrera, who was familiar with the rules of diplomacy, naturally understood what Carlo meant. He knew how to reply to Berlin. Of course, news of Italy's support for Germany quickly spread back to Berlin. although Italy has refused direct military action due to its current weak armaments. Other than that, its performance in other aspects is consistent with Austria-Hungary. Point regarding Rome's stance, Berlin also breathed a sigh of relief. You must know that Berlin has become closer to Vienna over the years. Whether it is communication or wooing, more diplomats go to Vienna. Therefore, Berlin still has doubts about Italy's willingness to fulfill the alliance treaty this time. This time Carlo answered without hesitation, giving Envoy Cabrera a satisfactory answer. To know who has the final say in Italy, no one in the world knows that the answer is a Carlo monarch. As long as the monarch agrees, then they are inseparable. Compared with Italy's promptness, Vienna's reply was a bit slow. Fortunately, apart from the condition of directly sending troops, both countries are willing to provide support in other aspects. Therefore, Germany, which was already leaning toward peaceful resolution of disputes, now has another wave of trouble. Radicals, including a group of junker nobles, believe that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. France's ally Russia is so weak and Germany's defensive pressure on the east has been greatly reduced. It should take this opportunity to launch a war against France and remove Germany's biggest threat in Europe. The French armed forces faced with the proposals of these radicals, the conservative faction headed by Prime Minister Billet directly suppressed the radicals who emerged again. First, they refuted each other's belief that the British would not participate. In the view of the stalwarts, the British Empire would not just watch Germany become the hegemon in Central and Western Europe. If a war breaks out between Germany and France, the British Empire will definitely join the war. Its massive navy would directly cut off Germany's maritime trade lines. Moreover, Britain's accession will have a chain reaction. First, it will be difficult for the two allies to make up their mind to continue supporting Germany. In addition, the addition of the British will also make the Russians in the east ready to move. In this way, Germany will face attacks from all directions. This is not what a wise man would do. Just as the Germans were divided into two groups and arguing over this, news suddenly came from France. As France's hardliner on Germany, Foreign Minister Delcas offered to resign. The post of Minister of Foreign Affairs is concurrently held by Prime Minister Alvia. The reason why France suddenly made the decision to change its foreign minister was that France had high domestic opposition to war with Germany. At this time, France has become a usurious country, which mainly profits from the export of foreign capital. Although the domestic antipathy towards Germany is relatively high, how many French people would be willing to see it if a war broke out? Besides, how many people in the French government can persist after facing pressure from the British? And many people are also clearly aware of the fact that France's national power has been surpassed by Germany. If the British are really unwilling to intervene, then the French alone will not be able to do anything to the Germans. That's right. Every time a war breaks out, all parties involved are rushing for victory. If there is no chance of victory from the beginning, who is willing to start a war? Therefore, the situation that was originally feared by both sides was opened up after France took the lead in making concessions. The news from France made Kaiser Wilhelm II determined to choose peace. The easing of relations between Germany and France has made European countries breathe a sigh of relief. Of course, Morocco, which was the source of the outbreak between the two countries, made concessions after some discussions. France has withdrawn some of its controls on Morocco, but joined Spain in maintaining police control. It can be said that France took a step back in order not to have a dispute with Germany over Morocco, has temporarily given up on annexing Morocco, but retained some control of its police force. Germany, on the other hand, showed its strength and let other countries see Germany's determination in the colonies. Of course, it is too early to tell who will take advantage and who will suffer, but the relationship between Germany and France will definitely be worse than before. Of course, the relationship between Britain and Germany will also be worse. Chapter 504 Army Expansion. Expand the army! Exclamation mark. The state of war between Germany and France caused by Morocco has been calmed down by the mediation of various countries, but the impact has been very far-reaching. For various countries, the crisis in Morocco has accelerated the behavior of various countries in taking sides. Smart people can feel the trace of gunpowder currently floating over Europe. So all countries have begun to make some necessary preparations, leaving aside other countries. Italy, as one of the major participating countries, can certainly feel this atmosphere even more. Therefore, after the relations between Germany and France have just eased, a parliament related to national defense and security is convening. Your Majesty, colleagues, our army currently has 18 division-level establishments, 6 brigade-level establishments, and several regiment-level establishments, with a total strength of only 193,000. Its troops, weapons, and equipment are the weakest among all countries. This it has also caused great pressure on our country's land. As the situation in Europe becomes increasingly uncertain, to the east of us is Austria-Hungary, which has a strong army of 410,000 troops. Although our country and Austria-Hungary are allies, we cannot pin our hopes on the allies. Besides, our country and Austria-Hungary have conflicts of interest in the Balkans. We cannot rule out that this will cause conflicts in the future. Point to the west of us. France is currently the main threat to our land. France has 530,000 troops, which is more than 300,000 more than our country. Fortunately, the French focus their main attention on the German-French border, so we can withstand their pressure. However, given the current complicated diplomatic situation, our country cannot rule out the fact that the French will focus on our country. In addition, our country currently has military needs in the Balkans, North Africa, East Africa and the Far East, so the army in these places is also indispensable. Therefore, our army believes that the strength of our army must be no less than 60% of France or 80% of Austria-Hungary in order to meet the basic defense tasks. In the conference room, an army officer was speaking impassionately about the pressure on the Italian army, but he kept saying one word: lack of funds. In the past few years, the army has been celebrating the Chinese New Year with Wangzhou, and every year has been worse than the last. Although the army's funding has not decreased, or even increased over the years, the proportion of funding has been decreasing year by year. The proportion of army funds in military expenditures has dropped from a high of 79%, the Tunisia crisis, to the current 39%. So far, the Italian army still has some early breech-loading guns that have not been decommissioned. Looking at the prosperous activities of the navy next door, no one in the army could not express envy. There is even a small rumor circulating in the army that the king is dissatisfied with the army, so he has ignored the army's silent efforts over the years. These rumors can also be seen as the army's complaints about not being taken seriously in recent years. But now, His Majesty the King finally remembered the army, and this meeting is proof point because this meeting was discussing army issues. In fact, in these years, the government and Carlo knew that the army was having a hard time. However, the army is not like the navy and cannot protect the Italian economy. Therefore, for the army, which is purely money consuming, it is difficult for the Italian government, which focuses on economic development, to spare money for the army. After all, Italy is not financially wealthy, and in order to develop its economy, it can only reduce military spending. As the army cannot protect the Italian economy, it naturally prioritizes compression. However, in the face of the army's complaints, the government has been well prepared. Although the army is suffering, and His Majesty also plans to increase military expenditures for the army, how much is a big question. We must know that the current total military expenditure of the navy and army is nearly 400 million lire, which has accounted for more than 20% of the fiscal revenue. This is not a small amount of money. So I saw Finance Minister Antonin Aldini stand up and speak. Everyone, I just listened to the army's speech, and I feel a lot from the bottom of my heart. We all see the army's contribution, so the issue of increasing the army's expenses is also urgent. I propose to increase the army's expenses by 50 million lire every year. Expenses to aid the development of the army. Aldini's words surprised many people. In particular, General Simeon, the Chief of General Staff as a representative of the army, showed a shocked expression. He also knew how difficult it was for former Finance Minister Tegela when the Navy wanted to build ships 2 years ago. And this new Aldini actually doesn't tighten the government's purse strings. It is completely normal for Simone and others to think this way. People in charge of finance have always been difficult to deal with, because being lenient in entering, and being strict in exiting, is a thought that everyone in charge of financial power has. In fact, For Alderney, who has been in office for more than a year, he must have his own ideas. If he can offer 50 million lire per year, first of all, as a newcomer, Alderney has worked in the bank and the Ministry of Finance for more than 20 years, but he has only been at the top of the Ministry of Finance for 4 or 5 years. Compared with his predecessor Tedula, he lacks prestige. In addition, as a candidate recommended by the Prime Minister and handpicked by His Majesty, how could Alderney go against His Majesty's will, after receiving almost explicit hints? In addition, perhaps due to his experience in the bank, Alderney is not as crazy about money bags as Tedula. As long as he is sure that it is urgently needed, he will be willing to allocate funds. Of course, there is actually another core issue, which is that Italy's fiscal revenue has increased significantly. To put it simply, the Italian government has money. Yes, this is a key to why the new chancellor is so generous. As for why the Italian government is rich, it is very simple, because the rapid development of the Italian internal combustion engine industry has led to the great development of the Italian petrochemical industry and related industries. Many of these industries are run by the government, such as the Italian Petroleum Company and the Naples Machinery Factory, which has a monopoly on diesel engines and related manufacturing. Take Italian Petroleum Company as an example. Last year, the company extracted 4.73 million tons of oil. Currently, most of the oil in Europe is provided by Italy. The profits and taxes paid by Italian Petroleum Company exceeded the 100 million lira mark in one fell swoop. Not to mention the Naples Machinery Factory, which monopolizes the production of diesel engines in the world. The factory also uses the characteristics of diesel engines to produce various special vehicles, and its life is prosperous. Although the profits and taxes paid are not as high as those of oil companies, they still exceed 30 million lire. This is under the premise that, in order to ensure the development of the enterprise, the government only takes away half of the profits. As for Fiat, the largest private enterprise in the country, it pays a lot of taxes. The tax revenue of 15 million lire is the highest among private enterprises. It is precisely the large-scale development of these enterprises that has allowed Italy's finances to grow very rapidly in recent years. So much so that Alderney, the new finance minister, was jokingly said by many to have picked up a political dividend. However, in the face of Alderney's increase of 50 million lire in military expenditures, although Simeon was excited for a moment, he did not agree immediately. Instead, he continued to speak. 50 million lire is still not enough for the current army. Among them, the army needs to be expanded to more than 390,000, and the expenses such as purchasing equipment and personnel funds are not small at all. So our army believes that an increase of 100 million lire every year is a very realistic number. Simeon's words shocked everyone present. This guy has a great appetite too. Even if I ask for 100 million lire, I won't be afraid of the wind blowing my tongue. Simeon's words also frightened Alderney. Although the revenue of the Ministry of Finance has increased a lot, the army's appetite is too big. How can it be accepted? No, the Ministry of Finance can't come up with 100 million lire. The maximum is 60 million lire. Any more will be gone. Our army has owed too much debt before, and it can't do with less funding. There are only 60 million lire. It is impossible to increase it for you. 60 million is simply not enough. We only 60 million lire. Our army 60 million. After a verbal battle, in the end, when the finance minister bid down 60 million lire, Simeon had to accept this condition on behalf of the army. Well, the Italian army has finally come to an end. Chapter 505 Military Reform. The government's additional funding has finally given the struggling army some relief. Of course, the army, which has received the money, needs to make good use of it. For General Simeon, the current number one man in the army, how to spend this money more valuable is what he is most concerned about. That's right. General Simeon is currently the number one person in the army because the minister of the army, Marshal Cadorna, has been recovering from illness in the past few years and has rarely been involved in military affairs. With the increase in funding, Simeon is indeed worried about how to spend the money. Speaking of which, as soon as the money was received, the General Staff gave two plans for additional funds. The first plan is very simple, that is to expand the strength of the divisions that are currently seriously understaffed. According to the General Staff's plan, this additional 60 million lire will allow the army to expand its strength by at least 20,000 to 40,000 troops. Of course, it is definitely impossible to spend this amount of money like this. It would be good to use half of it to expand the military strength. The remaining cost can also be used to purchase some new weapons and re-equip the troops. After all, new and old weapons currently coexist in the Italian army, and it is necessary to update the army's equipment. Compared with the prudent first option, the second option is a bit radical. In this plan, there is no plan to replenish the divisions that are currently seriously short of personnel. Instead, the new funds will be used for two aspects. On the one hand, it is the upgrading of weapons, and on the other hand, it will use the funds to continue to expand divisions prepared by. That's right, it's to increase the number of infantry divisions currently severely short of personnel in Italy. However, although it seems that such an Italian division level unit has a small number of people, only 8 or 9,000 people, its equipment is not much different from that of a full division. Take the 6th Division of the army as an example. It is equipped with 18 105mm howitzers, 54 76mm mountain field guns, more than 100 light and heavy machine guns, as well as various guns, vehicles, radio stations, field telephone lines and other materials. The total equipment procurement cost up to more than 16 million lire. In addition to the cost of purchasing equipment, there is also the cost of training it, and daily training costs are also quite large. With the 60 million lire in Simeon's hands, he can only form 3 such shortages every year. So in his office, Simeon looked at these two plans and fell into deep thought. When I had no money, I thought about spending more on the military, but when the military spending increased, it became difficult to choose. But just as he was deep in thought, he heard the secretary's voice coming from outside the door. Admiral, the Director of Education, Admiral Darkian, is here, please. Ask Admiral Darkian to come in. Haha, Darkian is so free to come see me today. 4. Simeon, the #1 man in the army, to make such a warm gesture. On the one hand, the two have a good relationship, and on the other hand, he is considered to be of high authority. Since Prussia defeated France, its advanced military system has been imitated by other countries. The same goes for the Italian army, which made a large number of copies of the Germans. The mobilization system, total war, etc. were all copied to a very similar degree in Italy. As for the 3 giants of the German army, Minister of Army, Chief of General Staff, and Director of Education, Italy also has them. And it is similar to Germany in terms of functions. Therefore, how can General Darkian, who is in charge of the training and education of the Italian army, not be considered a high-ranking official? The education director of the Italian army smiled and said to Simeon, as soon as he entered the door, "Simone, I heard that you are worried about how to spend the money." Although Simeon wanted to ask how you knew, he held back because he knew that this visit must be difficult. So he said frankly, "Yes, I do have a headache spending the money." Faced with Simeon's confession, Darkian smiled and said, "Actually, I think neither of those two options is the best choice. Do you remember the staffing issue we talked about before?" Darkian's words immediately brought Simone back to his senses. Of course he knew what he was talking about with Darkian. At that time, the two of them were talking about the increasing number of new equipment and the increasing number of division level personnel. They both felt something was wrong, so they talked about their respective opinions. "You mean you want to make changes to the army organization?" Simone asked a little uncertainly. Faced with Simeon's question, Darkian nodded and answered, "Yes, that's what I came to see you for." "Do you still remember the drill we conducted before?" "I remember of course." Simone remembered that the increasingly large division level troops in the exercises at that time also had many problems during the exercises. Of course, in addition to military exercises, the Russo-Japanese War in the Far East also gave Italy sufficient reference value. For this war, the Italian army conducted in-depth research. The results of the study show that the larger the size of the army, the less conducive it is to its mobilization. At present, although the actual number of people in a division in Italy is small, the establishment is very large. According to the latest standards of the Italian Army Ministry, a fully equipped army division should have an infantry organization of 2 brigades, 4 regiments and 12 battalions. A battalion consists of 4 companies of 254 men, plus a 6 maximum 12 Revelli machine guns, machine gun company, plus artillery, engineer battalions, cavalry battalions, baggage regiments and other units. A full division has more than 19,000 people. Such a huge force makes the army's top brass feel very bloated, which is not conducive to wartime command. Some people may ask. This is true for other European countries as well. Why is it that Italy alone feels that its troops are bloated? That's a good question, because each country's national conditions are different, so their national defense requirements are also different. Compared with its great powers, Italy needs to defend mainly mountainous areas, and the mountainous terrain determines the small-scale elite troops, which is more suitable for this terrain. Therefore, it makes sense that compared to other countries, Italy feels that a large division-level force is not suitable for its needs. But how to change it now is a difficult question. Whether to change it from above or from below is difficult to judge. After all, changing the establishment is not a trivial matter, and it is common sense to be more cautious. Dark Ian looked at Simeon and said. But Simone didn't believe it when faced with Dark Ian's words. Don't look at me like this. I know you must have some ideas. Please bring them out for reference. I really don't have any ideas. Just a little thought. It doesn't matter. Any idea is fine. It's always good to refer to it. Faced with Simeon's questioning, Doc Ian was really helpless and had no choice but to say, then let me share my humble opinion. First of all, the problem of the large size of the army is that it is actually very simple to lose weight, but it is a bit difficult to ensure the combat effectiveness as much as possible. Of course, Simeon also knew what Dark Ian said, otherwise he wouldn't be embarrassed by it. However, I think that if we want to slim down the army, we should first make changes from the top. I think changes can be made at the brigade and regiment levels first. In addition, whether the number of companies at the battalion level is too many, is it appropriate to cancel an infantry company? Then, will the current 4/4 formation at the squad and platoon level also undergo certain changes? And if the number of infantry is significantly reduced, should the larger number of supporting firepower also be reduced to a certain extent? And in view of the Chinese division, considering the possible war situation in the future, does it also need to make certain supplements at the corps level, such as letting the corps have 3 divisions under its jurisdiction, or adding technical arms such as artillery to the corps? Dark Ian spoke out his thoughts at once, leaving Simone a little stunned. It seems you have a good idea, so let's sit down and talk slowly. Simeon then talked with Dutch late into the night, and continued the discussion the next day. After a total of 3 days of conversation, after synthesizing the views of both parties, the two decided on the organization of Italy's new infantry division. For the sake of conservatism, the two decided not to move to the organization below the company level. According to the two men's ideas, a new Italian infantry division had 3 infantry regiments and 1 artillery regiment. There will be no changes to the units directly under the division, and the brigade level of the infantry division will be directly cancelled. In addition to the major changes at the brigade level, there are also major changes at the battalion level. First, the 4 infantry companies were directly cut into 3. Secondly, the two men planned to transfer the machine gun company under the battalion to the company level, to form a machine gun platoon, to enhance the firepower of the company level. After such changes, the total strength of the new infantry division will be reduced to more than 14,000. It is much smaller in scale than before. As for discussions at the corps level, we still need to wait and see the effect of the changes at the division level before deciding whether to make changes. Of course, the plan is still in its first draft, and it will need to be carefully demonstrated and piloted to see the effect before deciding whether to promote it to the entire military. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 506 Alitalia's Ambition. Milan is the most prosperous city in Italy and a transportation hub in northern Italy. The bustling metropolis and convenient transportation make Milanese well informed. But this year, well-informed Milanese were also shocked, because Alitalia was established in Milan. Some people may ask, why is it so shocking to establish an airline? Sorry, I didn't make it clear. What shocked the people of Milan was not the world's first airline to use the sky for cargo and passenger transportation, but the transportation tool they used, the rigid airship. When these giant 100-meter-long creatures slowly float thousands of meters above your head in the sky, the shock they bring is simply beyond words. That's right, Alitalia's current vehicle for transportation missions is an airship, and currently the only one capable of commercial aviation is the rigid airship developed by Count Zeppelin. Compared with the aircraft that can only be played in the game of the brave at present, although the rigid airship appeared later, its commercial value is more valued in this era. Take Alitalia's 4 existing airships as an example. Its smallest airship, the ZL-5, is 112 meters long, 7.9 meters in diameter, has a dead weight of 48 tons and a usable lift of 21 tons. It is equipped with 2 600 horsepower VL2 inline engines, which were developed by the Milan Power Laboratory, and can drive the airship to a speed of 55 km per hour. Although the speed of an airship is not as fast as that of an airplane, the two are completely different in terms of load capacity. It is for this reason that, now that the airship has been launched, it can be put into commercial operation immediately. And Alitalia, as the first person to eat crabs, of course also made a lot of money. Except for maintenance and repair time, the 3 rigid airships are basically used for transporting passengers and cargo outside. Now they are mainly used for transporting passengers. After all, everyone has a dream of flying. If you can spend £100 or £200 on an air trip, I think no one can refuse this temptation. And compared with dangerous airplanes, airships are much safer at present. Alitalia has developed domestic air routes to Milan, Rome, Naples and other places. Of course, in addition to domestic ones, it has also developed many foreign routes, such as Berlin, Vienna, Paris, London, etc. Everywhere he goes, the local people are attracted to watch the airship. It seems that people are very enthusiastic about this big flying thing. And given that the airline's business is so booming, the airline's top executives certainly can't sit still. If they don't take advantage of such a good opportunity to continue to expand the airline's number of airships, it would be a shame for the top executives to receive generous salaries. General Manager, people from the Bank of Savoy are here. They are in the reception room, in General Manager Rahman's office. The secretary knocked on the door and informed him of the news. Okay, I understand. Let's get over it. Arman, wearing a straight and pressed expensive suit, put his work in his hands, picked up a document, and walked to the reception room. Hello, General Manager Arman. Hello, President Seidel. Seidel, president of the Milan branch of the Bank of Savoy, brought the branch's credit manager to meet with him. President Seidel, this is our company's business performance in the past 3 months. You can take a look first. Arman, the general manager of the airline, handed the document he carried with him to President Seidel, who casually handed it to the credit manager. Just take a look, you two. Although our company has only been established for less than a year, our company's financial situation can be seen from the income flow. If the airship was not too expensive, our company would not even think of asking your bank for a loan. President Seidel listened to Arman's story, and he actually knew a lot about Alitalia. Although the company was established only a short time ago, and its capital was not very strong, it was only 15 million lire. But if you look at its shareholders, you will know that the Italian government invested 45%, the royal family invested 25%, and others invested 30%. It is precisely because of this that the landing sites established by Alitalia in the suburbs of several major cities in China are so smooth. In addition, the establishment of landing sites abroad has also been facilitated by other countries. The information was checked quickly. After reading the information, the credit manager of Savoy Bank nodded to President Seidel to express his approval of the information point. However, although he approved the content of the information, there were some things that President Seidel had to ask in person. After all, the loan amount applied for by Alitalia this time is a bit large. If the head office had not sent a secret telegram that could help Alitalia, he would not have dared to accept the loan application from the company. 50 million lire was something he had experienced. This is the largest loan I have ever taken out, Mr. Arman. Your company applied for a loan of 50 million liras from our bank. This is not a small amount. For the safety of this loan, I hope to hear how your company uses this loan. Faced with President Seidel's inquiry, Arman smiled slightly. Actually, even if you don't ask, I will tell you. The reason why we, Alitalia, will lend such a large amount of money is because we are optimistic about the future of air transportation. As he spoke, Arman took out a map of the world with lines drawn on it and continued. At present, Alitalia has developed many air routes, such as the Central European air routes from Rome to Milan, Vienna to Berlin, and the Western European air routes from Rome to Turin, Paris, and London. However, in view of the current shortage of airships, our company we are preparing to borrow 23 million lire to purchase 7 medium and large airships to fix these aviation routes. Another 4 million lire will be used to open aviation stations in various cities for the docking and maintenance of airships. After finishing speaking, Arman looked at the 2 longest lines on the map with a pious expression and said, with the remaining 23 million lire, our company will use it to build 2 ultra-large airships for ultra-long distance shipping missions. The North and South America routes across the Atlantic are the focus of our Alitalia airline in the next stage. If you want to ask which sea route is currently the busiest, you don't have to think too much. The sea routes between North America and Europe are the busiest. There are not too many people from Europe to live in North America, and people from North America come to Europe to study and do business. Not too much, and the demand across the Atlantic Ocean on both sides gave birth to the busiest sea route at present. The fact that the Blue Ribbon Award for the fastest speed across the North Atlantic has been broken one after another is a reflection of the busyness of this route. It is very reasonable for Alitalia to want to get involved. After all, the speed of an airship is definitely faster than that of a ship, and the experience of the sky is comparable to that of the sea. Therefore, the 2 super large airships that carry Alitalia's dream of intercontinental routes must be built. As for the South American route, it goes without saying. One more thing, at present, the maritime shipping from South America to Europe is mainly based on large sailboats. Is there any mistake? While ships were not only burning coal, but were also upgrading to fuel oil, South America was still using such primitive power as wind power. That's right, that's the truth. Because there is a very intuitive problem at present, that is, South America is too far away and there are lack of supply points along the way. It is difficult for coal-fired ships to cross the gap between Africa and South America at one-time distance. There is also a very economic reason, that is, South America is short of coal and lacks thermal coal to burn ships. Some people may say, can't we go north first, to North America, and then to Europe? This is okay, but the price of shipping is too high, definitely much higher than that of a sailboat. If you have that time, you might as well build a ship to carry a large amount of coal. This is probably more cost effective than taking the North American route. The intention of Alitalia to open routes to South America is also very obvious, that is, to allow the rich and powerful people in South America to travel to and from Europe more conveniently. Although Arman did not say how to open up the American route, Governor Seidel is already aware of the prospect of opening up the route. He stood up, stretched out his hand, and said, Mr. Arman, you have convinced me. It is hard for me to imagine the profits and prestige your company will bring if it opens routes to the Americas. And if I don't lend you a loan, I will definitely regret it. When President Seidel agreed to lend, Arman also had a smile on his face. President Seidel, believe me, this is the wisest decision you have ever made. Alitalia will not let anyone down. I believe too. After seeing off the bank people, Arman immediately picked up the phone and ordered, send a telegram to Zeppelin now, so we can start construction. Arman's order was quickly transmitted to the Zeppelin company in Germany via telegram. As the founder of the company and the inventor of the rigid airship, Count Zeppelin attached great importance to Aletelia's order. After all, the price of a rigid airship is too high. In addition to 2 or 3 orders from the government and the military, his company's other orders are all from Alitalia. Not to mention that Italy has 9 ships this time, and 2 of them are big ones over 200 meters long. It is necessary to complete the order beautifully. So, after receiving the telegram, Count Zeppelin rarely spoke excitedly to the people present. "Everyone, we are going to have a big fight." Chapter 507 Mount Vesuvius. The royal palace, located in the center of Rome, is the center of Italian power. Many decisions that affect Italy and the world have been released or shaped by this. As the helm of Italy, Carlo has a lot to do every day. Preliminary results of army division level pilot reforms. Carlo picked up a document, looked at the title on the cover and read it out. Carlo actually didn't understand much about the army's military reform that Simone and Yang had instigated. Although the 3-3 system was famous in later generations, the withdrawal of brigades and reorganization of regiments was also a historical trend. But apart from some basic knowledge, Carlo had no in-depth understanding at all. The army is most taboo about laymen guiding experts. So what ability does Carlo, a military layman, have to guide the army's reform? Is it really like a mindless novel, where the protagonist casually talks about the benefits of the 3-3 system, and then the military feels like it has found a treasure, and then carries out reforms like crazy? How can it be such a good thing? Even if it is a correct idea, if it is not at the right time, it may also cause the failure of a reform. Therefore, as long as it involves reform, it must be done with caution and full consideration. The same is true for the reforms carried out by the army. Conduct a pilot reform on one unit to see if the results are suitable, and then decide whether to carry out major reforms across the board. As for handing the report to Carlo, this is very simple. On the one hand, it is to show loyalty to His Majesty. Every action taken by the army is reported to His Majesty. The second one is also preparing for a rainy day. The reason is simple. Any military reform requires sufficient funds. Although the army has increased its funding at present, it is not known whether military reforms will be sufficient in the future. If we do not make some preparations in advance, we will be blind when we get to that point in the future. Although Carlo may not always be able to see through the army's little thoughts, he understands them to some extent. For Carlo, as long as the army's combat effectiveness can be improved, it is not impossible to relax on the funding issue. Of course, all this must be under his control. The report submitted by the army looks good. The 6th Infantry Division, which is undergoing pilot reforms, has reduced its total strength by 27% after some downsizing, but its combat effectiveness has only dropped by about 10%. Of course, the next step is to make changes to the technical arms of the pilot 6th Infantry Division. After all, the 6th Division currently has 72 barreled artillery pieces. For the Italian army, it feels a bit too much, and some changes may be needed. One more thing to say here is that the 6th Infantry Division was selected as a pilot, which is a big surprise. Because of the effect of the experiment, the 6th Infantry Division is currently the only fully equipped unit of the Italian army. With more than 14,000 men, it ranks first in the army, and even the division level troops of the guards are not as large as it. Very nice. Carlo looked at the contents of the report and gave a rare compliment. The army's changes seem to be very effective, which is why Carlo praised them. Just when Carlo was about to pick up the next document, he saw his captain of the bodyguard trotting over in a hurry. "Your Majesty, Mount Vesuvius erupted and covered Naples with volcanic ash." The words of the captain of the guard, McClellan, made Carlo's face tighten. This volcano is 11 kilometers southeast of Naples, so don't erupt too big. It needs to be explained here that Mount Vesuvius is also famous in history. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius during the Roman era buried the cities of Pompeii and Stabiae in volcanic ash and volcanic debris, and the city of Herculaneum was also buried by mud flows, and the volcano is also very active. From 1660 to 1872 alone, the volcano erupted 17 times, which was extremely active. This sudden eruption also announced to the world that the active period of the volcano is not over yet. As for Carlo, he snatched the telegram from the captain of the guard and immediately read it at a glance. The telegram was sent by Clive Joglio, a senior official in the province of Campania, saying that Mount Vesuvius in Italy, which had been sleeping this morning, suddenly erupted, and the ash from the eruption could also be felt in Naples. In view of the current emergency situation, he has ordered people within 10 kilometers around Mount Vesuvius to evacuate immediately. In addition, the Naples power plant has caused power failure due to volcanic ash, and many factories have also shut down. Now he has ordered the police to maintain local security and organized a rescue team to rescue people around the volcano point. Now he hopes that Rome will provide support, whether it is material or human support. He wants this senior official of Giulio Point. After reading the telegram, Carlo immediately gave orders to the captain of the guard. Immediately notify the government and the military of the request from senior official Giulio and ask them to immediately send manpower and material resources to support the Naples area, as you command, Your Majesty. After receiving Carlo's order, the captain of the guard hurriedly notified the prime minister and the military point. After waiting for the captain of the guard to leave, Carlo banged the table hard to vent his inner dissatisfaction. This volcanic eruption came at a really bad time, and it was still in Naples. Rome's investment in Naples over the years has not been small at all. The continuous investment of funds and technology in petrochemicals, machinery manufacturing, textile dyes and other industries has made Naples, the largest city in the south, no worse than the 3 cities in the north. And to put it bluntly, in terms of the level of support received by various cities in Rome over the years, Naples ranks second and no one dares to rank first. Point. That's why Carlo was so dissatisfied after hearing that Mount Vesuvius erupted again. But it is useless to be dissatisfied now. We can only hope that this volcanic eruption will not be too big, otherwise Rome will come to clean up the mess again. Point. Speaking of which, the location of the city in Naples is not good. There is an active volcano next to it, which is too dangerous. But who made the soil covered with volcanic ash around Mount Vesuvius too fertile, so Italians risk their lives to farm here? Therefore, the towns destroyed by each eruption of Mount Vesuvius will soon be filled by brave people. Point. That's right. Carlo, as the king, has nothing to do about this situation. Point. As a government and the military, they would not have received the news of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius much later than Carlo. So by the time Carlo's order was conveyed, both sides had already begun preparations. On the government side, Prime Minister Antonio sent Interior Secretary Cruz as a government representative to immediately go to Naples to direct and coordinate disaster relief operations. On the military side, the Navy and Army also transferred a large number of tents, cooking utensils, water filters and other relief materials from warehouses and headed towards the disaster area. In addition, the Navy and Army deployed engineering troops to march towards Naples before the arrival of support from Rome. Senior officials of Giorgio organized personnel to carry out rescue operations. They first evacuated the elderly and weak people from areas close to the volcano, and then placed them in various churches, schools and other places in the northern suburbs of Naples away from the volcano. During this period, various political parties and enthusiasts also formed rescue teams to assist with rescue and logistics work. Point. It needs to be explained here that the danger of volcanic eruptions is not just the slow lava, but the hot volcanic ash that is actually more deadly. The volcanic ash from these eruptions is extremely hot and can easily cause burns. If inhaled into the lungs 4 years ago, Mount Pelée in the Caribbean erupted. The hot volcanic ash almost wiped out the neighboring city of Saint Pierre. Except for 3 lucky people, more than 30,000 people in the city died in just 5 minutes. Such is the power of volcanic ash. Of course, the energy of the eruption of Mount Pelée was dozens of times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb, so it caused a huge disaster. After Cruz arrived the next day, the Interior Secretary, who brought a large amount of relief supplies, immediately carried out disaster relief work. First of all, in order to avoid possible riots, the Interior Secretary tightened supervision on Naples. In addition, he was still the same person who was involved in disaster relief. This measure, after all, has used everything that can be used, but it is a little larger in scale. Point. After everyone's efforts, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius subsided 3 days later. It seems that the scale of this eruption is not too large. According to scientists' statistics, Mount Vesuvius erupted with only 0.13 cubic kilometers of energy, which directly caused damage to the surrounding area of 20,000 square kilometers. As for casualties, hundreds of people in the town of Ottaviano failed to escape, and some roofs collapsed due to the gravity of the volcanic ash, which also caused some casualties. However, according to government statistics, the total number of casualties was 739, of which 54 were injured. Chapter 508 Great White Fleet, Part 1. The disaster of Mount Vesuvius erupted quickly. A month after the volcano stopped erupting, parts of the Campania province, where Naples is located, have returned to normal. In addition to those who lost their loved ones in this disaster, and are still missing them in pain, among others, the volcanic eruption has already become a topic of conversation. Of course, Naples' losses were not small. According to subsequent statistics, the total value of its losses was about 46 million lire. The main damage came from the destroyed town of Ottaviano and the shutdown of surrounding factories due to volcanic ash. However, these losses are not borne by the people or the factories themselves. The government has also provided a more or less relief fund to somewhat compensate for some of their losses. Therefore, this volcanic eruption has become the memory of most people. The disaster caused by the volcanic eruption has basically come to an end, but life will still go on. One day more than a month later, the port of Naples welcomed a large number of warships. Anyone who is familiar with the Navy will definitely be very surprised, because currently all the warships that the Italian Navy can handle are gathered here. Is this because they want to designate the port of Naples as a military port? It's not surprising that some people think this way, because currently Italy has very few warships at its disposal. Except for the dreadnought battleship, the others are all warships of several thousand tons, and none of them have tens of thousands of tons. This makes the Italian Navy as a little embarrassed. There is no way who made the Italian Navy sell ships too harshly before, and also decommissioned a large number of old warships in order to build ships, resulting in today's situation of lack of supply. I can't even find a battleship to support the appearance. But don't worry, there are currently 2 Dent class battleships about to enter service, and 2 more are about to be launched. Moreover, a new Taranto class large cruiser is about to be launched. In just 1 year, the Italian Navy will be greatly improved. As for the current small difficulties, just overcome them. In addition, although Italy cannot handle large battleships, the situation is different for small and medium-sized battleships. The 26-knot Piedmont class light cruiser or the 30-knot new destroyer are both very interesting little characters. There is naturally a reason why these warships gather here, because a visiting fleet from the United States is about to arrive in Naples, so Italy, as the host, naturally needs to send warships to welcome it. Maybe some people have already thought that it is the famous Great White Fleet that is visiting this time. Compared with history, this visit took place 2 years earlier. The reasons are also caused by many aspects. First, after the victory of the Russo-Japanese War, Japan was too active in the Pacific and was suspected of squeezing American interests there. Therefore, this round-the-world visit of the US fleet has the element of showing its strength. Second, the new US President Roosevelt is an admirer of sea power theory, like William II. He attaches great importance to the Navy and is willing to support the Navy in showing its strength to countries around the world. Third, the United States has built a lot of warships in recent years. In just 6 or 7 years, the United States built 16 large warships. It was precisely after the family's financial resources were sufficient that the United States came up with the idea of showing off to other countries. This is not just to show off the strength of the US Navy, but also because it can benefit the United States. For example, on the Panama Canal issue, the United States relied on its expanded navy to force the French to let go of the Panama Canal. The US Navy, having tasted the sweetness, plans to show it to other countries, while the warships in its hands are not outdated. I feel that the effect is quite good. Japan, which was a bit noisy before, immediately showed enough enthusiasm. When the fleet arrived in Japan, the Japanese Navy sent 16 of its best warships to welcome the guests. After that, the fleet was not only summoned by Emperor Meiji, but also Admiral Togo Hihachiro, the commander of the combined fleet, also had a pleasant conversation with the American naval officers and soldiers. And the celebration lasted for a whole week, which made the US Navy quite happy. No way, the 16 newly built pre-dreadnought battleships do look majestic, enough to demonstrate the strong industrial strength of the United States. So much so that in order to allow it to pass through the Suez Canal, the canal had to be temporarily closed to other ships for 4 days. Now that this majestic visiting fleet is about to arrive in Naples, Italy, as the host, of course cannot dissatisfy the guests. So all kinds of warships that Italy can handle are gathered here, waiting for the arrival of the American fleet. Vice Admiral, the American fleet is almost here. On the flagship dreadnought, Lieutenant General Hilmer, the commander of the home fleet who was responsible for leading the reception, spoke immediately after hearing the words of the communications officer. Order, each ship prepares in turn to welcome American friend coming from afar. What? Lieutenant General Hilmer said is literal. Because the relationship between the two countries is very good at present, giving each other sufficient respect is the character that the Italian Navy should have. Following Vice Admiral Hilmer's words, the Italian warships also began to activate. They lined up in a long queue, waiting for the visiting American fleet. The American fleet has shown its presence in the distance and is heading towards Naples at high speed. Welcomed by gun salutes, the visiting American fleet entered the port of Naples one after another. Hello, Major General Sperry, welcome to Italy. During the welcoming ceremony, Vice Admiral Hilmer stepped forward and shook the hand of Rear Admiral Sperry, commander of the US Great White Fleet. Hello, Lieutenant General Hilmer, thank you for the welcome. As the commander of the Great White Fleet, Rear Admiral Sperry has also visited many countries and ports, and is familiar with diplomatic etiquette. Then the generals of the two sides shook hands with each other, and when Major General Sperry walked up to a middle-aged man wearing the uniform of an Italian Navy Rear Admiral, he spoke with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. Hello, Major General Leifer. Your Excellency is well known, and our colleagues all admire your command level, Major. General Sperry's words showed that they knew at the hands of whom they were suffering. Of course, this is not to settle old scores, but to show due respect. Faced with Sperry's profound words, Leifer, who had been promoted to Major General, could only answer with a smile. Thank you for the recognition from your colleagues and the country, but everything has passed, and we should look forward. Your Excellency is right, we should look forward. At the welcome dinner that night, officers from the United States frequently toasted to Leifer. Even Leifer, who had been tested for many years in battle, couldn't resist it, and didn't even know how to leave. This also shows that what the young guys say about letting go is a bit untrue. But finding space at the wine table is not the main reason for this visit to Italy, and the officers of the US Navy also know this. Sorry, there was something delayed before. Now we will resume the update. There will be at least 2 updates today to compensate everyone. Chapter 509 Great White Fleet, Part 2. In the endless sea, a neat and beautiful warship was sailing in the water. The towering towers and mighty cannons all showed its strength. A trail of water with waves was left behind the ship. This ship is the only dreadnought battleship that Italy can use, and there are a large number of American naval officers on board this most powerful battleship in Italy. This boat is really fast. An officer of the US Navy praised the warship at his feet while feeling the sea breeze blowing in his face. Since the Spanish-American War, the US Navy has attached great importance to the importance of speed after experiencing it personally. Apart from anything else, no matter how good their performance is, the speed of the battleships built in recent years cannot be lower than 18 knots. Among them, the Virginia-class battleship, which was launched 2 years ago, has a maximum speed of 20 knots, ranking among the top 3 fastest among pre-dreadnought battleships in various countries. From attaching great importance to defense to attaching great importance to speed, the transformation of the US Navy is breathtaking. But speaking of it, there is nothing wrong with the US Navy's emphasis on starting speed. Americans who span 2 oceans really need to pay attention to the speed of warships. If they still pay attention to protection as before, then there is something wrong. In addition to the speed, this group of American naval officers were very curious about everything on the dreadnought. Especially when the dreadnought launched a salvo, it caused these Americans to scream, "Vice Admiral Hilmer, your country's dreadnought is truly an epoch-making warship, with a perfect combination of firepower, protection, and speed. Its launch has directly changed the shipbuilding plans of various navies. All previously built warships will be destroyed. Sweep it into the trash." Rear Admiral Sperry knows the Navy very well, and he can praise the dreadnought so unremittingly, because this battleship is indeed outstanding. In the 2 years since its introduction, there must be photos of the ship on the desks of senior navies in various countries. At least Rear Admiral Sperry notes that this ship has the most photos in the US Navy. Your Excellency Sperry, you are very polite. This warship was mainly designed and promoted by our country's Viscount Cunobberti, which is why we have this warship. Faced with Lieutenant General Hilmer's polite words, Sperry just listened. Such a major decision to build a ship cannot be promoted by the designer himself. Even the talented Viscount Cunobberti cannot do it. He did not look down on the world famous Viscount Cunobberti. On the contrary, he was very envious of the emergence of such a talented warship designer in the Italian Navy. However, shipbuilding is too expensive and must be agreed by both the Navy and the government. It is unlikely to be done by one person alone, unless he is the leader of a country. Moreover, in addition to visiting the purpose of Sperry's trip, the dreadnought battleship is also one of the purposes. It must be said here that the United States has also followed the trend and built its own dreadnought South Carolina-class battleship. The ship is 141 meters long, 24.5 meters wide, has a draft of 7.5 meters and a standard displacement of 16,500 tons. It is equipped with 4 305 mm 45x caliber twin guns, 2 at the front and 2 at the back, backpack type, 22 76 mm 50x caliber single guns, and 2 533 mm underwater torpedo tubes. The main engine is a vertical 4-cylinder 3 expansion reciprocating steam engine with 2 sets/2 shafts. The main boiler. 12 Babcock coal-fired water tube boilers. Power 18,500 horsepower. The maximum speed is 19 knots. The performance of this battleship is very different from the Italian dreadnought. Not to mention the displacement, the length of the ship is also much shorter. After installing 4 twin main turrets, there are not many cabins left for the power part, not to mention the triple expansion reciprocating steam engine that the US Navy still uses, which makes the ship unable to perform as it should. Combat effectiveness. Therefore, the US Navy is very dissatisfied with the South Carolina-class dreadnought produced by its own designers, and is even more eager to keep up with the world trend. In this case, the US Navy needs to find another way. It happens that the US Great White Fleet is sailing around the world, so it is reasonable to visit Italy and directly experience the performance of the dreadnought. The Italian side was also very cooperative and allowed the American officers to experience the performance of a real dreadnought. So after returning to Naples that day, a secret message was sent from Naples to the United States. This also caused Admiral Yagia, the Minister of the Navy, to find Carlo in a hurry on the 3rd day. "Your Majesty, this is a request from the Americans to purchase our country's warships and technology." As he spoke, the Secretary of the Navy presented a list of warships that the United States wanted to purchase. Carlo took the list and read it, but his brows furrowed as soon as he looked at it. Just one Dante-class battleship and one Taranto-class battlecruiser. Facing Carlo's doubtful words, Admiral Yagia nodded uneasily. "Yes, Your Majesty, although the Americans have given high prices for the 2 battleships. A Dante-class battleship is priced at 60 million lire by the Americans, and Taranto is 75 million lire. The Americans want Italy to provide a complete set of blueprints for the 2 ships." Carlo felt a little worthless. If you say that countries like Brazil and Argentina are buying this way, then Carlo will decide to sell it. But the United States is different. Let's not talk about local tyrants. The key point is that the shipbuilding strength of the United States is not much worse than that of Europe. So faced with this offer, Carlo knocked on the table and thought about the pros and cons. The advantages: that Italy will earn money, which can be used to expand its army. The disadvantages are also obvious. This will improve the level of US shipbuilding and is not conducive to future wars in Europe. Point of course, saying this may be a bit praising Italy's role, but it is indeed the case. Although the industrial scale of the United States currently far exceeds that of European countries, its technological level is much worse than that of Europe. In recent years, the United States has purchased a large number of precision instruments and various technologies from European countries. But in terms of military technology, European countries actually have a tacit understanding to shield the United States. You see that even by World War II, the United States, which had experienced a large number of high-skilled immigrants from various countries, could only catch up with Europe in terms of technological level. Not to mention that at present, the United States is still in the stage of a primary industrial country. Therefore, in the face of the United States' request to purchase technology, Carlo had to consider it carefully. Point of course, even without the help of Italy, the United States can definitely build a dreadnought, but there is only a slight difference in performance compared with Europe. Let's see. The battleships are separated from the technology. If it's less than 200 million lire, we won't consider selling the technology. You can also ask the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help. After careful consideration, Carlo made a request. If you don't sell at a high price, how can you have the nerve to break the tacit understanding of various countries? Although Italy has made an exception once, it is giving too much. If you give less, then the rules are the rules. Facing Carlo's reply, Admiral Yagi felt confident. Next, under the negotiation of the Navy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Italy and the United States conducted arduous negotiations on the sale of warships and technology. Faced with the 200 million lire demanded by the Italian lion, although the United States has money does not come from strong winds. And it is also arguing with arguments. Even the negotiator, Johns, the US ambassador to Italy, proposed to purchase only battlecruiser technology. However, the US request was directly rejected, and Italy insisted on a rigid requirement of either buying all the goods or not buying them at all. Italy has the confidence to dare to say this. Firstly, among other countries, only Italy dares to sell dreadnoughts and cruise ship technology. Secondly, the Italian Navy has judged that, although the United States' need for new warship technology is not as urgent as last time, it is not inevitable. Optional. In fact, the Italian Navy's judgment is correct. The United States is indeed eager for new warship technology. In particular, the equipment and patrol technology is the most enticed to the US Navy. The reason is simple. The battlecruiser is the nemesis of the current patrols of various countries. It is the perfect weapon for those who want to seize the large interests of European countries in South America. After about a month of wrangling, the United States finally relented and purchased a Dante-class battleship, a Taranto-class cruiser, and a full set of technologies for the two ships at a price of $40 million, while the two countries were negotiating warship and technology deals. The United States Great White Fleet had already visited various European countries and embarked on its return voyage to the Americas. Overall, the visit of the American Great White Fleet was a success. It demonstrated the majesty of the US Navy to countries around the world. This voyage was also a practical test of the endurance of American warships, the reliability of mechanical devices, and the quality and endurance of the crew. Even if I made up for it yesterday, the steamed buns have broken their promise. Chapter 510. Benghazi. Benghazi in North Africa is an ancient historical city. The Greeks built the city here as early as the 5th century BC. It was also called Bilinchi at that time. It was later occupied by the Egyptians, Romans, Vandals, and Byzantines, and was ruled by the Turks for 300 years starting in the 16th century. This has been a caravan trading town leading to the interior of Africa since ancient times. A large number of merchants passed through the Sahara Desert to trade with southern Africa. Benghazi is currently the second largest city in the Libyan province, with a smaller population than the capital Tripoli, and the second largest port in Libya, with less port volume than Sirte. Although Benghazi is an ancient city, it will take a few years for Benghazi to truly enter the fast lane of development. As Libya has successively discovered oil and developed it in places such as Haragay and Korut, Benghazi, as the nearest port city, has also entered the fast lane of development. Moreover, Benghazi is different from other cities in North Africa. There are few buildings in the city that reflect the Arab style, and they are basically Italian style. The reason is also Italy's previous population relocation plan for the area point. In fact, this is not only true in Benghazi, but also in other cities in the Libyan province, and even in the provinces of Albania and Kosovo. The local indigenous people were forcibly relocated by Italy. Now the people living there are Italian residents, so the customs, language, and culture of the area are also mainly local. All this is due to the forced relocation plan. Although it will temporarily cause chaos in the local area and increase a huge amount of public security funds, the effect is very good. It has changed the local customs in a short period of time, and also increased the number of people. The centripetal force of the place towards Rome. This is a current situation in Benghazi. The city is basically filled with Italians, and the folk customs are no different from those in the Apennine Peninsula. As the second largest city in Libya, it has a population of 130,000 people, of which 30,000 are engaged in oil-related industries. Some of them work directly in oil companies, some are responsible for transportation, and some are responsible for pipeline maintenance or port work. Including his family, there are 8 levels of Benghazi's population living off oil. The prosperous scene in Benghazi also makes the newly appointed mayor Trish very ambitious. As one of the first officials to set foot in Libya with Governor George, Trish could be considered a Libyan expert. Over the years, he has worked his way from an ordinary government worker to the mayor of the second largest city in Benghazi. Looking at his face, which is already covered with hair and slightly weathered, you can tell that the hardships involved are not what outsiders can appreciate. Of course, being able to become the mayor of Benghazi from an ordinary government employee is enough to illustrate this person's ability. And Mayor Trish also knows Benghazi very well. No. At the expansion terminal of Benghazi port, Mayor Trish came with government officials to inspect it. Mr. Mayor, the area you are seeing now will be Benghazi's main oil transportation terminal in the future. In the future, through oil pipelines, Benghazi can transport oil to up to 5 transport ships at the same time every day, and the maximum daily transportation volume will reach 50,000 tons. The project leader enthusiastically introduced the importance of the terminal to Benghazi to the new Mayor Trish. Also listened very seriously and asked questions from time to time. On one side of the pier, there are more than a dozen tall and giant oil storage tanks, each with a volume of tens of thousands of square meters, and the largest can reach 100,000 cubic meters. These oil storage tanks are connected to oil pipelines, and the crude oil extracted from the oil fields flows continuously through the oil pipelines, and then flows into these giant oil storage tanks through pressurization valves. These oil storage facilities are the oil storage bases of Italian oil companies in Benghazi, and can store up to 300,000 tons of crude oil. In addition to this oil storage base, there is also a small refinery in Benghazi, and the refined oil is supplied to various parts of Libyan province. One more thing to say here. Currently, the country with the highest usage rate of internal combustion engines is the province of Libya, which produces a large amount of crude oil. Libyan province has the highest per capita car ownership and a variety of internal combustion engines. Even a small amount of arable land is cultivated using tractors produced by the Naples machinery factory. It can be said that it is precisely because of the flood of oil that Libya, a newly established province, is far ahead of other provinces in the use of internal combustion engines. Of course, in addition to internal combustion engines, in terms of local fiscal revenue, the Libyan province, which has 2 major incomes, iron ore and oil, is also ranked high among Italian provinces. If it weren't for the poor environment in Libya and the lack of available arable land, the population would definitely be more than the current 800,000. Of course, if you count the per capita gross national product, then Libya definitely ranks first. The sparse population and good income also allow many Italians to cross the ocean to make a living. In addition, the rate of electrification and public facilities penetration in Libyan provinces is also very high. Based on sufficient local finance and the large-scale use of fuel-fired generating units, even the more remote desert towns in Libya can have access to electricity. And if electricity is available, then electrified infrastructure such as electric lights and telegraphs. When Mayor Trish was inspecting the construction work of the pier, there was also a group of people busy on the high slope on the side of the pier. However, Compared with the docks, which are basically ordinary construction workers, these people are engineers in military uniforms. They are building military installations. Coastal defense batteries in Benghazi Point as Italy's main oil export port. Benghazi's importance has been further enhanced. Given the importance of Benghazi, protecting the port of Benghazi has become one of the important tasks of the Italian military. For land protection, an army infantry regiment and cavalry battalion are stationed on the outskirts of Benghazi Point as for the main threat at sea. In addition to naval warships, coastal defense forts are also necessary, so the coastal defense forts in Benghazi must be their point. In fact, the Benghazi coastal defense fort existed after Italy occupied Libya. However, Benghazi was not important at that time, so only two 152mm coastal defense guns were installed. As Benghazi became more and more important, more and more coastal defense guns were installed. In addition to 152mm, 254mm coastal defense guns were also installed. As for now, the Naval Engineer Corps is installing the 305mm coastal defense gun, the medium caliber and most powerful one currently available. The prototype of this coastal defense gun is a slightly improved version of the 305mm 45x caliber naval gun currently equipped on the Dreadnought ship. It has a maximum range of 21 kilometers, which is enough to make enemy ships that want to enter the waters of Benghazi port think twice. After all, unlike naval guns, shore defense guns have more relaxed environment, and their stability, accuracy, and range are not comparable to naval guns. This time the Navy plans to install two 305mm coastal defense guns in Benghazi for coastal defense. Even though there are only 2 doors, it is enough to suppress a squadron, 3 to 4 ships, of battleships. Benghazi is also the second city outside the Apennine Peninsula to install this gun. The first is Pontianak, which also shows how much the Navy attaches importance to it. It's okay not to pay attention to it, as the Italian Navy promotes the coal to oil plan. The demand for oil is becoming increasingly serious. Protecting one's own oil is very important to the Navy. It was also driven by the Navy that Benghazi became the second city in North Africa to be equipped with a new 305mm coastal defense gun. The first was Alexandria. Chapter 511 Greek Polar Alliance, Part 1. In Athens in June, the temperature is gradually getting higher, with the highest temperature of 32 degrees, even if it is close to the sea. It is relatively hot, especially for Prime Minister Petkov, who is used to the pleasant climate of Sofia. It is still a bit annoying. However, for Petkov, the hot weather in Athens is still bearable. Besides, he is not here for vacation, but for a friendly visit to his neighboring country, Ivanchev. Do you think the Greeks will agree to our request this time? At this time, Prime Minister Petkov sat on the sofa with a prickly look, unbuttoned his collar to let out the heat, and asked Foreign Minister Ivanchev, who looked the same as him. They had just visited King George I of Greece before, and the conversation went smoothly. Prime Minister, it depends on what the Greeks think about this issue. We have talked to them many times, and every time we can't discuss it, because of the ownership of Salonika. Regarding the topic of Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Ivanchev felt a little headache. Faced with the words of the Foreign Minister, Petkov said with a smile, "So this time I'm here." Of course, the Prime Minister also knows why the two countries cannot agree on an alliance over the ownership of Salonika. Because Thessaloniki is so important that no one is willing to let it go. Thessaloniki is the largest port city in Macedonia and the most populous and economically developed city in the region. It is also an important trade and transportation hub in the region. This one factor is enough for the two countries to compete for, not to mention that Salonika is a combination of many factors. It is an impossible goal for the two countries to let go. Therefore, in recent years, although Greece and Bulgaria have been willing to form an alliance when it comes to the ownership of Salonika, this willingness can only end in vain due to the trend of interests. Petkov's confident words aroused Ivanchev's curiosity. He wondered if the Prime Minister had any magic bullet that could appease the ambitions of the Greeks, and just when he wanted to ask, he heard a knock on the door. The voice of the Bulgarian ambassador to Greece came from outside the door. "The Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency Theotikis and Chamis are here to visit." The Sound outside the door immediately cheered up the two people in the room. They looked at each other and quickly arranged their clothes. "Please, your excellencies, come in. Good day both of you." The Greek Prime Minister Theotokos came in and greeted the two. "Good day, your excellencies Theotokos and Chamis." After the guest of honor took his seat, the visiting Greek Prime Minister Theotokos spoke. "I bring greetings from His Majesty the King of our country. He is very grateful to your country for this friendly visit and wishes that your two countries can sincerely unite and have a better future. Thank you for the greetings from your king, and please bring back my greetings to King George. As long as our interests are consistent, our two countries will be invincible if we unite sincerely." Petkov replied equally friendly. Point well, the two prime ministers were playing charades. One was talking about dividing the spoils after the fight, and the other was talking about dividing the spoils after talking. Point it can be seen from the riddles of these two people that the differences between the two countries have still not been resolved. Point seeing that the Bulgarians were still biting him to death and needed to distribute the benefits first, Theotokos said helplessly, "Your Excellency Petkov, there is currently a deadlock in the discussion about the distribution of benefits. There are a large number of our people living in Salonika, and it is impossible for our country to abandon the city." Faced with the remarks of the Greek Prime Minister, Petkov said with a serious face, "Your Excellency Theotokos, you should also know our country's need for Mediterranean ports. I cannot convince the people to accept the alliance conditions without Salonika. Well, now everyone is no longer polite and is considered shirtless. You see, our two countries have never been able to reach an agreement regarding the ownership of Salonika. This is actually not good news for our two countries. You must know that the Turks are not easy to deal with. If the two countries do not unite, no one will be able to regain the territory occupied by the Turks." Petkov also agreed with what Theotokos said. Although Bulgaria pretends to be Balkan Prussia all day long, they are unwilling to face the Turks alone. Among other things, Turkey has a population of over 30 million, Bulgaria has only over 4 million, and Greece has just 2 million, which is far inferior to the Turks in both countries. Of course, war is not just about population, it is about the number of troops, weapons, and equipment, training levels, personnel morale, etc. In comparison of these aspects, the training level and personnel morale of Bulgaria and Greece are better than those of the Turkish army, but the degree of improvement is limited, and far from being able to withstand the gap in the number of personnel. Point. Although the two countries have a much higher number of artillery, machine guns and other technical weapons per capita than the Turks, there is a large gap in the number of troops. At present, Greece has more than 50,000 troops, while Bulgaria has more than 70,000 troops. As their potential opponent, the Ottomans have 340,000 troops, of which 180,000 are elite troops trained by German consultants. Its equipment and training level are no worse than those of Bulgaria and Greece. Point. Therefore, even if the two countries unite, they may not be able to defeat them without risking their lives. However, although he is aware of this problem, Petkov believes that this cannot be a reason for Bulgaria to abandon Salonika. Your Excellency Theotokos, in fact, your country has already made money. Your country mainly uses its navy to occupy its islands in the Aegean Sea. The total area of those islands has exceeded 10,000, plus the land west of the Vardar River in South Macedonia. There have been at least more than 20,000 new territories. However, our country can currently occupy only South Macedonia east of the Vardar River, plus most of Thrace. The total area is only a little over 30,000. And Constantine. It is impossible for our country to get the fort, and even the Thracian territory on one side of the strait is very likely not to be obtained, so our country is not much better than your country. Petkov rationally analyzed the issue of interest distribution between the two parties. However, Petkov's analysis did not impress the Greek side, and Theotokos retorted, "Have you carefully calculated the gains and losses of our two countries? The land west of the Vardar River is completely inferior to that of the east. The west is mainly hilly and mountainous, and the population is not as good as that of the east. This is simply unreasonable." Faced with Theotokos's rebuttal, Petkov certainly knew the gap between the two, and he answered with confidence, "You are right, it is indeed the case. But have you ever considered that, if your country does not cooperate with our country, you will not be able to get the land west of the Vardar River? You must know that our country does not necessarily have to cooperate with your country. Serbia or Romania may become potential cooperation partners. As long as our country is willing to pay the price of part of its territory, I believe that the other side will definitely be willing to join this just war, to drive out the Turks. At worst, our country will not consider the issue of Turkish islands, and will only take southern Macedonia and Thrace. Petkov's words immediately made Tiartikis choked and speechless. Yes, it is really possible for Bulgaria to give up cooperation with Greece. As for Greece, there is no way around Bulgaria, unless it can cooperate with the great powers. But which major power is willing to help the Greeks take grain from the fire and fight against the Ottoman Empire? The fault lies with the Italians. Why did they not choose Greece, but let Bulgaria take advantage? Tiartikis was a little confused at this time. He stood up and said, "Sorry, this issue is too difficult to choose. We need to go back and discuss it. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I still have 3 days before I go back and wait for the good news from you too." Chapter 512 The Greek-Paul Alliance, Part 2. Bulgarians really say that. In the Palace of Athens, Crown Prince Constantine stood in front of his father and asked Prime Minister Theotikis, who had just returned, "Yes, Your Majesty, Crown Prince, the Prime Minister of Bulgaria really said that it's going to be difficult now, King." George I, who was sitting in his seat, murmured. George I was the first king of the Oldenburg-Schleswig-Holstein dynasty in Greece. Since becoming the king of Greece in 1862, he has been committed to the expansion of the Greek territory. Its primary goal was Crete, but things were hard to come by. The British did not agree to support Greece's annexation of Crete. Of course, as the younger brother of the British, they must also support it. So in 1881, under pressure from the British, the Ottomans had to cede the Thessaly region to Greece. And just when the Greeks were trying to get their hands on Crete, Italy got involved. An Italian-Austrian war involving Bulgaria allowed Crete to establish its own republic. Although Greece also took the opportunity to capture Epirus, the Greeks no longer saw hope of recovering Crete, which was protected by Italy, in a short time. Therefore, South Macedonia, most of Thrace, and the Aegean Islands, which are still in the hands of the Ottomans, have become new targets. However, if they want to continue to expand at this time, they cannot rely on the support of the British alone. It is simply impossible for the Turks to accept the loss of these areas. As for relying on themselves, the Greeks no longer considered options. After experiencing a disastrous defeat. The only choice for Greece is to form an alliance with other countries to deal with the Turks. From a broad perspective, there is only one target that can be chosen, and that is the Bulgarians, who also covet their territory. However, there is an irreconcilable conflict between the two countries, which is the competition for Salonika. Bulgaria wanted to obtain a usable port in the Aegean Sea and get rid of control of the Black Sea Straits controlled by the Ottomans. In Greece, it is because of the large number of native Greeks in the city. Of course, Thessaloniki's population and economy are a great compliment to both countries. This is because the Bulgarians have determined that our country cannot do without them. Prime Minister Tiartikis said the fact that no one wants to think about, do we have to accept the harsh conditions of the Bulgarians? Crown Prince Constantine asked reluctantly. Faced with the Crown Prince's words, Foreign Minister Chamis spoke. "Your Highness, it seems that this is the only way it can be done at the moment. We need each other more than the Bulgarians. And the Bulgarian Prime Minister is right. We have no choice, but the other side has other options. From a diplomatic point of view, as long as we still wanted to gain Ottoman territory, one must accept this condition." Although the words of Foreign Minister Chamis did not sound good, people present also knew that this was the case. Greece was even more inseparable from the other party than Bulgaria. Chamis is right. The current situation is indeed that we are not competing for Salonika's capital, so there is no need to worry too much about this. Only what you get in your hands is yours, and what you see from a distance is yours. Get excited, as the king, George I spoke, which was regarded as the final decision on this matter. Faced with his father's words, Crown Prince Constantine was a little unwilling to give in. the crown prince shouted with a look of unwillingness. "Father, I think." However, the crown prince's words were immediately stopped by his father. "Okay, you don't have to say anything. I know what to do." The majesty of the old father made Crown Prince Constantine quiet now. As for the prime minister and the foreign secretary, they don't know what to do when they see this situation. "As you command, my lord." Now that the general policy of taking a step back has been decided, there is no need to trouble the wise and powerful monarch with the next small details, so several ministers are ready to go back to continue discussions with the Bulgarians. As for the crown prince, although he was still a little unconvinced, Constantine could only accept his father after the prime minister and others left. Old King George looked at his son and said, "Aren't you willing to give in?" "Don't dare." How could the old king, who knew his son as his father, not know his son's thoughts? At this time, he let out a long sigh. "Constantine, I know what you want to say, and there is a reason why I stopped you. If you are an official, then I will appreciate your actions very much. But you are the future monarch, so there are some things you should not do. Must be avoided. Even if it is beneficial to the kingdom, it will damage your prestige. A prince must possess good virtues and at least not be known to be associated with immoral things. Because you are the final arbiter, every order and word you make will be interpreted by countless people. So you need to guide officials to do it for you instead of trying to solve the problem alone." George's words of sincerity made the crown prince realize his previous impatience. "Father, I know what to do." As soon as he finished speaking, the crown prince Constantine left in a hurry. Seeing his beloved son like this, the old king couldn't help but put his hand on his forehead. The crown prince himself is still so impatient even at the age of 40. It is a bit worrying to leave the kingdom in his hands in the future. As for the old king's worries about his son, we can put an end to it first. After receiving the news hinted by the king, the prime minister immediately took the foreign minister to find the Bulgarian prime minister. "Your Excellency Petkov, in view of the friendship between your two countries and the unity and identity in the future, we have decided to respect your country's opinions on the issue of Salonika." In a secret room in the Bulgarian embassy, Tiartakis, the Greek prime minister, was explaining to the Bulgarian side the reasons for Greece's concessions. In the face of Greece's concessions, Bulgaria is of course very happy to see it. At least Bulgaria does not have to pay a higher price to find Romania or Serbia. "Your Excellency Tiartakis, our country is very grateful to you for your country's profound understanding of justice. We hope that your two countries can unite sincerely and defeat our common enemy the Turks." Petkov talked with Tiartakis with a smile on his face. Being able to reach an agreement with Greece is also a good thing for him as the prime minister. At least they were a little more sure of dealing with the Turks. Now that the differences are gone, we must next talk about the issue of sending troops. Of course, the two heads of government will certainly not discuss the details in detail, but they can still discuss the big aspects in the next 2 days. The two prime ministers reached a preliminary agreement. In future battles with the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria would mainly deploy its army to deal with the main force of the Turks in eastern Thrace. Greece's navy is mainly responsible for maritime battles. In addition, the Greek army needs to encircle and annihilate the Turkish army in South Macedonia, and then reinforce Bulgaria. Both parties are quite satisfied with the initial negotiations. Next, the two prime ministers need to report the matter to the monarch and the military. The details should be discussed by more professional people. After all, the two prime ministers are not diplomatic professionals, of course. The most important thing for both countries now is to step up arms expansion and preparations for war, to prepare for the next war. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 513 Submarine Force. Massaua is the main port in Italian East Africa and a very important port on the Far East trade route. Basically, Italian ships traveling to and from the Far East like to stop at Massaua for supplies and repairs, because here is the best shipyard in East Africa and very skilled shipyard workers. These workers will quickly deal with the algae and shellfish on the bottom of the ship, allowing the ship to sail again quickly, and the charges are relatively cheap. With the advantages of being cheap and fast, many ships from other countries also like to choose Massaua as a port for docking and repairs. Therefore, Massaua has been prosperous in recent years, by relying on East African trade and port calling services. Of course, as Italy's largest port in East Africa, Massaua will certainly not be short of warships. But today, off the coast of Massaua, a strange warship suddenly surfaced, and a group of naval officers and soldiers were scrambling to climb out of the hatch. Ahem. Cough, cough. Mr. Luofu, can you inform us next time you conduct experiments? Look at how embarrassed everyone is. Captain Berera, who had a beard and a greasy face, and wore the same greasy navy shirt, stood on the boat and coughed twice, complaining to the engineer on board, who had just climbed out of the submarine. Ralph, who looked similar to Captain Berera, apologized to him with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Captain Berera. I was expecting to arrive in Massaua soon, so I wanted to check the underwater emergency submarine charging, but I forgot to close the hatch, and Luofu's words made the other officers and soldiers on the boat look angry. You must know how dangerous it is to start the diesel engine underwater, and something might happen. This person actually dared to do this for the sake of experiment. Are these onboard engineers who are inspecting submarines desperate for their lives? Captain Berera gestured with 3 fingers in his hand, and said with a vicious expression, we can't just let this matter go. When we get to Massaua, you have to treat everyone to at least 3 glasses of rum. No problem, I'll buy you 3 glasses of rum. Everyone, knowing that Captain Berera was trying to save himself from the siege, Rove readily agreed to this condition. As for the officers and soldiers of the submarine, most of their attention was attracted by 3 glasses of rum at this time, so most of their anger was reduced. After a while, the smoke in the cabin cleared, and then Berera spoke. Boys, now move on to Massaua, where there is wine and food waiting for us, as well as hot baths and girls. Berera's words made everyone on the submarine cheer. They had not been on land for half a month. At this time, there was nothing comparable to these. Staying in a small submarine cabin was simply worse than going to jail. So under the leadership of Verila, this new submarine built by the Livorno shipyard rushed towards Massaua not far away. Captain Berera and others are driving Italy's latest submarine, a C-class submarine. This is the 11th submarine built in Italy and the 2nd submarine designed by John Holland in Italy. The father of modern submarines still had great ambitions. Faced with an invitation from Italy, even at an advanced age, he left the unhappy United States without hesitation, and came to Italy, to design his beloved submarine. The Type C submarine has a displacement of 250 tons, an underwater displacement of 303 tons, a length of 41.2 meters, a pressure hull length of 27.8 meters, a width of 4.08 meters, a height of 8.6 meters, a draft of 3.83 meters, a maximum depth of 90 meters, and a normal depth of 50 meters. It is equipped with 2 4-stroke 6-cylinder diesel engines, each with a power of 350 horsepower. And underwater power is provided by 2 electric motors with a power of 220 horsepower. The maximum speed underwater is 11.4 knots. The maximum speed underwater is 5.8 knots. The fuel load is 12 tons. The surface endurance is 1400 nautical miles/8 knots. And the underwater endurance is 35 nautical miles/4 knots. The main weapons are 2 533mm torpedo launch tubes, which can carry 5 torpedoes or 12 mines. A 37mm gun is installed on the deck. The submarine has a crew of 26, including 3 officers. Think about it, how uncomfortable it is for 26 personnel to stay in a small space of more than 20 meters long. The pressure-resistant shell is the only place where personnel can stay, or to stay there for more than 10 days. Not to mention the addition of several shipyard engineers who were on board to inspect the equipment. It became even more crowded. Although the C-shaped water surface was not very fast, it was just off the coast of Massaua, so it quickly arrived at the military port in Massaua. Bella, long time no see, Tovani, 2. Rough palms are held tightly together, representing deep friendship. Captain Tovani, who is currently the first mate of the cruiser Farius, said with joy as he looked at his friends and classmates for many years. I didn't expect you to go to the submarine force, let alone meet you here, Captain. Barrera said equally happily. Actually, I've wanted to come to you for a long time. Isn't it just the right time? In that case, let's go. I know you are arriving in Massawa today, and I have specially prepared to take you to taste the delicacies of East Africa. That's just right. I've been eating all the bread in the submarine these days, and I'd long wanted to change my taste. After saying that, Bella left the military port in a car under the leadership of Tovani. Since Massawa is a trade and supply port, it will bring together people from all over the world, and the style of Massawa's architecture is also the same. What about the Middle East? Buildings of various styles such as South Asia, Africa, and Europe can be seen everywhere, and Tovani took him to an East African style restaurant about 1 kilometer away from the military port. Your Majesty Tovani, welcome to your visit. As soon as I got off the car, I saw a fat black man of 200 pounds walking quickly towards Tovani with an exaggerated expression and dancing. Took, are you ready for me to treat my friends to delicious food? It seems that Tovani is very familiar with this fat black man. Of course. How could I forget the distinguished guests that Mr. Tovani is going to entertain? They will be here soon, too. Ken, who brought the two people to the dining room, immediately answered point. After a while, the waiter came with various delicacies, such as roasted tender lamb, roasted camel hump, fried bananas, black coffee, and some delicacies that looked good, but could not be named. The table was piled with these foods. Come, drink to our friendship. After the crisp sound of clinking glasses, the two started eating happily. Especially Barrera, who is tired of eating bread these days. It's like a wind and a cloud. It's so comfortable, and the East African food is really good. Barrera, who was very satisfied with his meal, put down his knife and fork, and touched his belly point. As for Tovani, he had already taken out 2 cigars. A cigarette after a meal is better than a living god. This is true for smokers all over the world, and this person obviously has not escaped the range of smokers, so puffing up after a meal is inevitable. Bella, there's something I don't understand. Why did you want to go to the submarine force? Tovani looked at his friend and asked where he came from. Don't blame Tavanahu for asking this, because currently, in the Italian Navy, submarines, an emerging force, do not attach much importance to it. Moreover, the nature of submarines made many Navy officers scorn them. In their opinion, the Navy should drive battleships to confront the enemy head-on, with cannons roaring and steel colliding. There is nothing more romantic for a man than this. Hiding in a dark corner like a submarine, waiting for the enemy to come and attack suddenly, is simply unattainable. This is not just a view held by the Italian Navy, but also by navies from all countries. After all, the Navy is a noble service, so sneak attacks will definitely not be recognized by the nobles. When asked by his friend, Barrera answered silently, because I like this feeling of lurking, and I think submarines have great potential in the future, because they can lurk in the sea. The Navy not only needs warships on the surface, but also warships under the water. Since his friends had said so, Tovani could only raise his glass again. Then I hope your wish comes true. Thanks. Barrera was very satisfied with the treat given by his friends tonight, and his subordinates were not as well fed as they were. Next, they will spend a week in Massawa for repairs, and then continue to test this new submarine. Chapter 514 Bounce Ticket. Since unification, Taranto has been Italy's most important military port, so the Navy has invested a lot in Taranto over the years. In addition to normal military facilities, these investments are also invested in technology research and development, so Taranto now has many research institutions and equipment factories. These scientific research institutions have promoted the research and development of new equipment and new technologies for the Italian Navy, so Taranto is not only a simple military port, but also a naval base camp. Therefore, Viscount Cuniberti, the chief designer of the Kingdom of Italy's Navy, will come here from time to time, because this is currently the main research and development base for various new technologies in the Navy. As the chief designer of the Navy, Cuniberti also has his own office in Taranto, because the Naval Ship Design Institute is also in Taranto. Damn, it's so unreliable, it's been postponed again. Cuniberti pushed away the Naval Battleship Design Office complaining all the way. And his words made everyone else in the battleship design office open their eyes and look at the chief designer, who had offended the best battleship designer in Italy at present. Teacher, what's wrong? Unlike others, Pugliese, a student of Cuniberti, only came in and asked concerned about him. After he returned to the office. Pugliese respects his teacher very much, because it is because of his teacher's respect that he can become a battleship designer. You know, not many people want to be talented Cuniberti students. As long as he shouts loudly that he wants to accept students, a long queue will definitely form in front of the design institute, and designers from all over the world will want to ask for his advice. Especially after he completed the Dreadnought and the installation patrol. It established the teacher's lofty status in the world of warship design. So far, there is only one student who can become the teacher's student, and that is him, Pugliese. In some ways, Pugliese is proud enough, so he is completely different from others in some things, and his guess was good. Cuniberti was quite patient with his students' inquiries. Pedros broke his promise again and delayed the design of the 350mm naval gun. When Pugliese heard the teacher's words, he immediately understood the teacher's mood and immediately added another sentence. Mr. Pedros from the Naval Gun Research Institute, is this the second time he has broken his promise? Didn't the top brass of the Navy say anything? Why didn't he say it? The Navy has informed him that if it continues to be postponed next time, then the Navy will need to consider the necessity of the Naval Gun Research Institute. Pugliese was also shocked by Cuniberti's words. He didn't expect the Navy to say such serious words. Teacher, why are the Navy so eager? Facing his student's inquiry, Cuniberti immediately answered, there are two reasons. The external reason is that currently all countries are building a large number of new dreadnoughts, and the Navy wants to ensure that the performance of its warships continues to be at the forefront. Therefore, there is an urgent need for a warship that can suppress the dreadnoughts of various countries. That's why we have received such high demands from the Navy for new battleships, worthy of being the person who designed many epoch-making warships for the Italian Navy. Cuniberti accurately judged the Navy's needs. Currently, countries all over the world are building dreadnoughts on a large scale, and the Italian Navy is far inferior to other countries in terms of numbers. Take the British Empire as an example. In the two financial years of 1905 and 1906, it started construction of 8 dreadnoughts of the Bellerophon class and the St. Vincent class. It is said that next year, the British Empire will allocate funds to build 3 more ships. The momentum of the world's first navy cannot be compared. In addition, the British Empire also made a decision in 1906 to start construction of 4 Invincible class battle cruisers within 2 years. Moreover, this cruise ship is also very different from that in history. First of all, in terms of speed, the new Invincible class can run at a speed of 26 knots, and it also has 8 305mm naval guns. In terms of firepower, its goal is very clear, which is to target the threats from the battle patrols of Italy, Germany and the United States. After all, the British Empire could see at a glance that this kind of warship posed a huge threat to sea routes. So the British Empire must have enough warships with the same performance. In addition to the British Empire, countries such as France, which is facing huge pressure on land, Russia, which was defeated in the Far East, Austria-Hungary, which lacks maritime interests, and Japan, which has just become a great power, also have a huge desire for dreadnoughts. They were either preparing designs or working on construction plans. Anyway, in this maritime shipbuilding competition, no one is willing to give up the trident of Poseidon, the god of the sea, and all countries are participating to a greater or lesser extent. Regarding his teacher's words, Pugliese, as a member of the designers, is of course aware of the recent situation. Therefore, after facing the navies of various countries launching dreadnoughts, as the sponsor of the dreadnoughts, how can the Italian Navy retreat? At present, the Italian Navy has 2 plans. One is to launch an improved version of the Dante class. For the improved model of the Dante class dreadnought, the naval warship design has many plans. From the standard 8 305mm guns to the most exaggerated 12 guns, there is literally everything. This is all what Cuniberti has done with his design skills. the result of the hard work of my colleagues. As for the second option, that is to build something that can suppress the existence of dreadnoughts under construction in various countries. Since you want to suppress the dreadnoughts of various countries, you must use more powerful artillery for the crucial firepower among them. The first choice is the 350mm 45X main gun, currently jointly developed by Germany, Italy, and Austria. This artillery was launched after the successful development of the 305mm 45X main gun. Although after years of research, the three countries underestimated the difficulty of researching the 350mm 45X naval gun. The research work that was supposed to be completed in 1906 has been delayed until 1907, and the deadline has been delayed again. Of course, the Navy is not short of 350mm guns, because in addition to the option of increasing the caliber, the Navy can also choose to increase the multiple. At present, the research work on the 305mm 50X main gun jointly studied by the three countries has been completed. The shooting results of the prototype gun are pretty good. If there is no second option, then the Italian Navy cannot use this long barrel. The 305mm gun serves as the main gun of the new generation of dreadnoughts. In fact, the research and development of this long-barreled 305mm main gun mainly relied on Germany and Austria. The technologies of the two arsenals of Krupp and Skoda are still very powerful, and their research and development work is progressing smoothly. For this reason, the Italian Navy still complains, saying that the two countries' main research on naval guns is on long-barreled 305mm naval guns, instead of focusing on the larger caliber 350mm. However, the current situation is not unacceptable to Cuniberti, because as an excellent battleship designer, designing an excellent battleship will come up with different plans according to different situations. Although warships using long-barreled 305mm main guns are far less deterrent than 350mm, they are not so unacceptable when there is no other way. Chapter 515, The Austro-Hungarian Navy's Dreadnought Plan. If Cuniberti faces a problem in selection, then for the current Count Montecuccoli, how to let the Austro-Hungarian Empire possess dreadnoughts is a crucial problem at the moment. Speaking of which, the Austro-Hungarian Navy is simply a stepmother within the empire. The military expenditures required are managed by the War Department, which is largely influenced and controlled by the army. Therefore, the life of the Austro-Hungarian Navy has never been satisfactory, and the War Department just dealt with it by casually sending 3 melons and 2 dates. This seems to have a lot to do with the Austro-Hungarian tradition of not paying attention to the Navy. In the Austrian era, there was no Navy at all for a long time. It was not until the 19th century that Austria-Hungary established its own navy in Venice. Although the Austro-Hungarian Navy was formed late, its combat effectiveness is still guaranteed. Italians agree very much with this. However, due to the location of Austria-Hungary, the Navy has not always been the focus of Austria-Hungary's attention, so the Austro-Hungarian Navy has always been ignored. Of course, it is not ignored at all times. If it is cared for by the royal family, the life of the Navy will be much easier. For example, during the periods of Archduke Friedrich, Commander-in-Chief of the Navy from 1844 to 1847, and Archduke Ferdinand Maximilian, Commander-in-Chief of the Navy from 1854 to 1864, the Austro-Hungarian Navy developed very well. But unfortunately, Archduke Friedrich died young at the age of 26, and Archduke Ferdinand Maximilian left Austria to become emperor in Mexico, died in Mexico 3 years later, causing the Austro-Hungarian Navy to lose its strong supporter. Also, in view of the prosperity of the previous 2 archdukes, relatively speaking, if the Austro-Hungarian Navy wants to obtain more funds and government level support, then a member of the royal family can become the head of the Navy, which is simply the best choice. Of course, as the director of the naval department of the Austro-Hungarian War Ministry, Count Montecuccoli already had a suitable candidate. Speaking of which, Austria-Hungary is definitely a strange entity in terms of its military management department. The Imperial War Department is nominally in charge of all Austro-Hungarian armies, such as the Imperial Wehrmacht, the Royal and Royal Local Defense Forces, etc. The composition of the Austro-Hungarian army is very complicated, so I won't go into details due to space limitations. Those who are interested can check it out by themselves. Among the major countries, Austria-Hungary is the only one that places the navy under the influence of the army, so the hard life of the Austro-Hungarian navy is quite difficult. However, although the Austro-Hungarian navy is having a hard time, it still has ambitions. When various countries are launching dreadnoughts, the Austro-Hungarian navy also has its own ideas. Your Majesty the Crown Prince, this is the dreadnought ship plan prepared by our navy. As the head of the navy, Admiral Montecuccoli approached Archduke Ferdinand as the Crown Prince with the plan that the Austro-Hungarian navy had worked hard to study. In addition to the plan, a carefully carved model of the plan is also presented. This is a little trick from Montecuccoli. Taking out the battleship model will help the Crown Prince feel the new battleship more intuitively. As for Admiral Montecuccoli's gift, Archduke Ferdinand nodded with satisfaction. This Archduke Ferdinand is very famous. I believe that no one in future generations will not know about him. In this era, this man is also very famous. In addition to his status as the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary, his love story with the Czech girl Sofia is also talked about. For this reason, he also paid the price of letting his children give up their inheritance rights, so that the royal family reluctantly agreed to this marriage. Archduke Ferdinand loved hunting, and was relatively moderate in terms of ethnic policies, which gave the Austro-Hungarian minority high expectations for him. But these are not worth paying attention to the Austro-Hungarian navy. What really deserves attention is that the Crown Prince is a supporter of the sea power theory and attaches great importance to the role of the navy. This is precisely the case, so everyone in the navy has high hopes for the Crown Prince. If it were not for the identity of his heir and the attitude of the army, making Archduke Ferdinand the head of the navy would be a brilliant idea. Although Ferdinand did not have the opportunity to become the head of the navy, it did not affect his relationship with the navy. So, after receiving the plan from the navy, Archduke Ferdinand read it with relish. Why does your plan look so similar to the Italian Dante class, Archduke? Ferdinand looked at the model in front of him, then compared it with the drawings, and asked. Faced with the Crown Prince's inquiry, Admiral Montecuccoli did not hide it at all. Your Highness the Crown Prince, our dreadnought is indeed based on the Italian Dante class, but we have made quite a few changes. For example, we have only increased the displacement by 1,000 tons to have a Dante class and a half firepower, and the cost of building ships will not be much higher than that of the Italians. Admiral Montecuccoli's words made Archduke Ferdinand's eyes light up, and then he asked, "Tell me how your navy managed to surpass the Italians." Facing the Crown Prince's inquiry, Admiral Montecuccoli then discussed how the Austro-Hungarian navy had made a series of modifications based on the Dante class template, such as reducing the length, lowering the freeboard, increasing the main gun, etc. In fact, the changes made by the Austro-Hungarian navy were more at the expense of reducing the seaworthiness of the Dante class, because when Italy designed this class, it not only considered the calm Mediterranean Sea, but also needed to consider the use of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans with complex sea conditions. Therefore, in order to ensure the seaworthiness of this class of warships, designs such as high freeboard and V-shaped bow, to increase displacement are used. The usage situation of the Austro-Hungarian navy is different from that of Italy. Its main sea area is the Mediterranean, so it does not need to consider high sea conditions. Then those measures to increase displacement and seaworthiness are no longer needed, so this naturally reduces the displacement and cost. In addition, Italy's configuration of 8 main guns is too few for the Austro-Hungarian navy, so the Austro-Hungarian navy is considering equipping triple main guns. Without reducing the number of forts, Austria-Hungary is equipped with 12 main guns. The dreadnought was thus achieved. It has half the firepower as the Italian Dante class. The Austro-Hungarian navy has considered such careful calculations, which is of course a good idea, but only God knows how it will perform. Archduke Ferdinand also understood the plan submitted by the navy. But to put it well, Austria-Hungary has its own national conditions. This plan looks good, but we have to wait a little longer to get funding from the parliament. Regarding the Crown Prince's words, Admiral Montecuccoli said that he didn't mind at all, which was a lie. But he also knew that it was not easy to get the parliament to spend money on shipbuilding. Just defeating the Austrian and Hungarian parliaments is not a simple matter, let alone the army that is eyeing them. Your Highness the Crown Prince, our navy is not in a hurry. We can wait. In addition, our navy can raise part of its own funds. Admiral Montecuccoli, on behalf of the navy, proved to the Crown Prince that it not only asked for funds, but also raised them itself. The Austro-Hungarian Navy's fundraising is nothing more than external financing and introspection. External financing is to raise donations from all walks of life. Introspection is of course the Navy's internal tightening of belts, selling some unimportant warships, or saving funds from other places. The Navy was so sensible that Ferdinand naturally valued it more. That's good. It will also make it easier to get funding. Count Montecuccoli certainly knew that what the Crown Prince said was not a joke. The Navy also considers the difficulty of appropriation, so it needs to raise funds on its own to reduce the difficulty of getting funding from Congress. Your Majesty the Crown Prince, we actually have another idea, which is to use the funds to build it first, and then the Parliament will allocate funds to continue the construction. Well, the Austro-Hungarian Navy worked hard enough for the dreadnought, even killing it first, and then showing off. Let's wait until I come back from Berlin next month. As for the Navy's intention to take risks, Ferdinand asked him to wait. As for appropriating money from the motion, he still has no idea and needs to think about it for a while. Point after all, Austria-Hungary is a country with a dual system. It not only needs to consider the attitude of the Austrian parliament, but also the Hungarian parliament. This makes Ferdinand need to make a good plan. Chapter 516 The Three Emperors Talk, Part 1. SYNOPSIS Palace is located in Potsdam, southwest of Berlin. It was built by King Frederick II of Prussia to imitate the Palace of Versailles in France. The beautiful environment here made it an ideal vacation place for Frederick the Great. Point today, SYNOPSIS Palace welcomed new guests from Italy and Austria-Hungary, delegations from the two countries, led by King Carlo of Italy and Archduke Ferdinand, Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary. Point the host Germany also attaches great importance to the arrival of the two delegations. In addition to the Kaiser, the government also has Prime Minister Bülow, Foreign Minister Holstein and others, as well as military representatives such as Moltke, Schlieffen, and Tirpitz. A huge team of people welcomed the arrival of representatives from the two countries. There is a reason why Germany attaches so much importance to the delegations of the two countries. Europe has gradually formed two major camps. As the well-deserved big brother of the alliance camp, Germany certainly wants to further strengthen the ties between the three countries, and it is best to form a unified alliance camp with foreign countries. Therefore, the German side put a lot of thought into inviting delegations from Italy and Austria this time. For example, the families of the monarchs, crown princes, of the two countries were invited, and Germany also offered a lot of benefits to continue to win over the two countries. For example, regarding Italy, Germany plans to use more Italian oil and reduce automobile tariffs between the two countries. Therefore, as soon as the two delegations arrived in Germany, they could feel the enthusiastic welcome ceremony of the Germans. In just 1 week, Germany organized several welcome banquets. It gets grander and grander every time, and the intention of having a conspiracy is clearly visible. Point as for Germany's intentions, Italy and Austria are not fools, and of course they are aware of its plans. But knowing it, the two countries have no intention of rejecting it, because as the saying goes, everything has a price. If the other party does not agree, it means that your price is not enough. This is a completely true portrayal of the country. Point of course, in addition to interests, sometimes personal feelings can also be exploited. Point you see, the good time spent by the three monarchs and their families together is the best opportunity to connect with each other. Point in the hunting ground near SYNOPSIS Palace, the three monarchs, crown princes, held shotguns and stared at the deer in the distance with vigilance. As a royal hunting ground, the animals here are well protected. Point behind the three monarchs, crown princes, several tall guards carried prey for them, including rabbits, foxes and other small and medium-sized animals. We were so lucky that we encountered a herd of deer. As the owner of the hunting ground and a frequent visitor, William II looked at the deer and spoke softly. It feels like we can get a little closer. Archduke Ferdinand, who was also an experienced hunter, loaded a bullet and spoke enthusiastically. Then, what are you waiting for? Come on. Although the hunting frequency was less, Carlo who was intrigued, also set his sights on this herd of deer. Then the three monarchs quietly approached the deer. When they were 100 meters away from the deer, the three stopped. "Carlo, you choose first." As the master, William II asked Carlo to choose first. Then, "I'll choose that deer." The Carlo people, who were addicted to food, gave priority to the majestic leader of the deer herd. He watched vigilantly while eating grass, but he did not notice the dangerous humans staring at him at all. Then, "I'll choose the stag on the left." "I choose the one on the right." After the three of them assigned the targets, they each raised their shotgun standard targets. Carlo also put the deer in the sight, and he held his breath and listened to William's report. 3, 2, 1 shooting. Pa, pa, pa. The roar of 3 shotguns immediately activated the originally peaceful deer herd, and they quickly ran into the distance. In addition to the fleeing herd of deer, 2 deer fell on the grass mournfully, because 2 bullets hit them. These 2 deer were chosen by William II and Archduke Ferdinand. As for the target chosen by Carlo, they were currently fleeing far away with the herd of deer alive. "Carlo, it looks like you're not very lucky." William II put down his gun and spoke with a smile on his face. "Yeah, not so lucky." Carlo handed the gun to the guard behind him and said with a regretful expression that he had bad luck. If you don't see the attendant holding only a quail behind him, then this statement is still somewhat credible. Archduke Ferdinand, who also handed the shotgun to the guard, sighed with emotion. "The hunting with you two was the happiest day of my life. At least it is much better than the many worries in the country." Friends, when you are happy, don't think about troublesome things. As a good friend, Wilhelm II enlightened the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary. France, don't think too much. If you think it's okay, then you can tell your troubles and we can help you analyze them. Regarding William II's words, Carlo nodded in acquiescence. "Well, the problem is about appropriating funds for the navy." At this point, the Crown Prince glanced at Carlo's reaction and continued after seeing that the other party listened carefully. "Our navy wants to build 4 dreadnoughts to enhance our country's influence in Europe, but the problem is stuck in Parliament. Both parliaments failed to pass funding for the navy's shipbuilding, which makes me embarrassed." Faced with Ferdinand exposing his shortcomings, William, who had spoken now, spoke after thinking for a while. "On the Austrian side, it may be necessary to dispel the army's worries, so Uncle Joseph is the best breakthrough. As for the Hungarian parliament, in fact, we can tell the Hungarians to protect their status in the navy. I believe the Hungarian parliament should agree." Carlo suddenly interjected. Both William and Ferdinand were a little surprised by Carlo's words. "Ha ha ha, Carlo's method is worth considering." William opened his mouth to praise at this time. In fact, he did not seriously consider whether Carlo's suggestion was appropriate. However, considering the complicated relationship between Italy and Austria-Hungary, Carlo's ability to speak means a lot. As for Ferdinand, he seriously considered the suggestions given. In fact, Carlo's suggestion is very useful, because if you want the Hungarian parliament to agree, you must understand the Hungarians. In the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Hungary, despite its crazy oppression of other ethnic minorities, was actually a sign of lack of confidence in its core. Because of the formation of a dual empire with Austria, Hungary suddenly gained the same power as the Austrians. Although this makes Hungarians happy, but after tasting the sweet taste of power, Hungarians have a kind of anxiety, which is the anxiety of fear of the loss of power. So, in order to keep their power, Hungarians made a lot of strange decisions. For example, on the issue of Bosnia and Herzegovina's integration into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Hungarian parliament voted overwhelmingly against it, because Hungary was afraid that too many Serbs in the country would turn the empire into a tripartite system. So Carlo's words also gave Ferdinand an idea. "This is a good idea. Thank you for your advice, Archduke." Ferdinand, who felt that most of his troubles had been solved by these two, felt much more relaxed now. "Gentlemen, the time looks about the same. We can't keep the lady waiting at the camp." The Kaiser, who had just finished reading his pocket watch, opened his mouth to remind him of the time. "Then, let's go back." "Good idea." The 3 monarchs reached a decision and immediately rushed to the camp. As for the 2 deer that were shot, the guards would send them back to the camp. As soon as he returned to the camp, Carlo heard his wife Maria yelling angrily. "Vittorio, what did you do with Louise?" Carlo looked intently and saw that his son Vittorio and the Kaiser's youngest daughter were being disciplined by their two mothers. They were like mud monkeys, their bodies stained with mud, grass juice, and berries. Faced with this situation, Carlo immediately walked out. "Okay, it's normal for children to be lively by nature. Just ask them to pay more attention next time." Chapter 517 The Three Emperors Talk, Part 2. Several monarchs had a happy gathering to relax, but the senior military and political officials of the three countries were not as leisurely as their own monarchs. In a large conference room in Quirinal Palace, a talk about the three kingdoms was also going on. "Your Excellency Biro, your country's request to amend the alliance treaty will cost our country a lot of money. So, has your country considered our country's actual needs?" It was Antonio who spoke. As Italian Prime Minister, he also needs to safeguard Italy's interests. This time the three countries negotiated to renew the alliance treaty. In his opinion, this new treaty was detrimental to Italy's interests, because the original Triple Alliance Treaty was mainly aimed at Russia and France, but when the alliance was about to be extended this time, Italy was surprised to find that the Germans actually added the British Empire to their targets. Faced with such a situation, Italy is currently unwilling to see it. The reason is simple. Although the relationship between Italy and the British Empire has no longer been harmonious in recent years, Italy is not willing to add the British Empire to the list of enemies. Because Italy has a long coastline, if a war breaks out with the British Empire, the Italian Navy has no confidence that it can ensure the safety of the coastline. This sudden move to target the British is most detrimental to Italy and should be stopped. That's why Prime Minister Antonio stated Italy's attitude at the beginning of the meeting. Faced with Antonio's reaction, Prime Minister Grillo, who is on the host German side, was not surprised. I saw him opening his mouth to answer. "Sir Antonio, I think this is a misunderstanding on your part. Our country has no intention of targeting the United Kingdom, but only as a possible preventive solution, so it was added to the treaty." The German Prime Minister's words made General Iagia, the Italian representative, intolerable. "Does your country know the threat to our country by targeting the UK? Currently, the British Navy has warships with a total tonnage of 2.1 million tons, while our country currently only has 480,000 tons, and your country only has 810,000 tons. Our two countries combined neither is 2/3 as good as the other party. Does your country have any good solutions to such a disparity in naval strength? And it is possible to add the million-ton navies of France and Russia. Besides, if there is a war with Britain and your navy does not go to war, it will not put all the maritime pressure on our country. This is simply an unacceptable treaty." Faced with Admiral Iagia's accusation, the German side turned its attention to Marshal Tirpitz, obviously hoping that he could stand up and convince the other side. However, Tirpitz dodges in the face of everyone's expectant eyes, because he is also a navy, and of course he knows that it is difficult to answer this question. After all, in terms of naval tonnage, the combined tonnage of the two countries is only 2/3 of that of the UK. Could this obvious gap in strength be changed with just 2 or 3 words from him? However, facing the intimidating looks of everyone, Tirpitz felt that it was impossible not to say a few words and spoke. "Your Excellency Iagia, our country acknowledges the current gap with the British, but this gap will not increase. The dreadnoughts currently developed by your country have brought naval battleships into a new era, and at the same time it has given us the opportunity to catch up. Only we need the three countries to invest sufficient funds. Then we can use the advantages of new warships to turn the situation around in one fell swoop." Although Tirpitz spoke impassionately and even attracted praise from other naval officials, in the eyes of Admiral Iagia, what Tirpitz said was empty talk and was of no use at all. Because Tirpitz avoided one of the most important issues, which was the issue of government funding for the Navy. As a technical service, the Navy is the most dependent on funding. It takes money to build ships, money to train, and money to develop new technologies and new equipment. All of this money basically depends on government funding. Therefore, Marshal Tirpitz did not talk about the amount of military expenditures, but what could he do to compete with the British Navy. If the other party doesn't talk about it, then don't blame him, Admiral Iagia, for making it clear. Your Excellency Tirpitz, as far as I know, the current shipbuilding cost of your country's navy last year was 118 million marks, which is even lower than that of our country. Italy's shipbuilding cost in 1906 was 160 million lire, 128 million marks. The British shipbuilding cost is 18 million pounds, 360 million marks. I think there is no need to say more. Admiral Yagia directly clarified the problem. How could Germany convince Italy that it had the strength to compete with the British Empire's navy when its shipbuilding costs were so low? Faced with Admiral Yagia's doubts, Tirpitz did not deny it. Your Excellency is right. The current cost of shipbuilding in our country is indeed low, but this is only temporary. The main reason is that the Navy Act passed previously did not predict the increase in shipbuilding prices. Our country is preparing to pass a new shipbuilding bill next year. The ship bill will significantly increase our country's shipbuilding costs, which must reach at least half of the UK's level. Only in this way can our country be guaranteed to obtain 60% of the UK's naval strength. When Tirpitz mentioned this 60% statement again, Yagia felt like veins were popping out. Your Excellency wants to rely on 60% of the strength of the British Navy to hold back the opponent. It is simply ridiculous. Agile continued without giving the other party a chance to speak. Your remarks have already exposed the practices of your country's navy. If your country only wants to preserve its naval strength and wait for our country to take grain from your fire, then your country is overthinking. Our country will not accept such allies and alliances treaty. Your Excellency Yagia, our country does not have this idea. The war of words between the two navy ministers was witnessed by everyone present. For below, one of the decision makers who proposed amending the alliance treaty, the Italian Navy's fierce rebuttal represented Italy's fear of adding Britain to one of its targets below still values Italy as an ally. Because this not only means adding more defensive pressure to the old rival the French, but also allows Germany to use Italy to extend its power to the Mediterranean point. In addition, Italy's heroic and aggressive naval force, which is expanding rapidly, is also a great help to Germany. According to estimates by the German Navy, if the Italian Navy's expansion is completed, it will have 16 battleships, 6 cruise ships, and hundreds of small and medium-sized battleships to control the powerful naval power in the Mediterranean point. If this force can be utilized well, it can contain at least 1/3 of the energy of its old enemy France. This is equivalent to a disguised reduction of the French investment on land, which is more conducive to the implementation of the Schlieffen Plan. In addition, it can help Germany share the pressure from the British. Why not? But it is not easy at all to get the Italians to agree. Chapter 518 The Three Emperors Talk, Part 2. Your Majesty, Italy is very resistant to adding Britain as a target. We felt it during the previous talks. In a room in Quirinal Palace, Prime Minister Billet was reporting the results of previous talks to Emperor Wilhelm I. Listening to the Prime Minister's report, William II tapped his fingers on the table unconsciously and asked, "What else?" "We can feel that Italy is somewhat wary of Britain's powerful navy and believes that if our country does not increase its naval investment, they will not agree to include Britain in the alliance treaty." The speaker was Navy Minister Tirpitz, of course. He is happy to see Italy's request to attach importance to the navy. After all, how could he not be willing to increase naval funding? Facing the words of the Minister of the Navy, William II spoke hesitantly. Since Italy is resistant to adding the UK to the target, can we exclude it from the conditions? William II's words made the German senior officials present look shocked, and the Prime Minister below even spoke. Your Majesty, please think twice. There was a reason why Prime Minister Biro spoke at this time, because he knew the Emperor's feelings towards Britain. The Emperor had a love-hate relationship with Britain. It claimed that an armed conflict with Britain was the most unimaginable thing, but in terms of actions, it allowed the German Navy to build large-scale ships, making Britain feel like it was facing a formidable enemy point. But among the German government and people, there is no such sentiment towards Britain. In their view, the British Empire was just a potential rival of Germany, and they did not have the complicated feelings of the Emperor. Therefore, for the sake of the Emperor's Majesty, William paid great attention to his words in public. Of course, if you forget sometimes, the senior government officials around you also know to make up for it immediately, as is the case now. So, does the government have any new measures? And if the Prime Minister reminds him, William will know not to talk about this topic. William II was not stupid, and of course he knew the importance of binding Italy more closely. After all, senior military and political officials could share a lot of pressure on Germany's land and sea, especially for Italy's heroic and capable navy. William and senior German military and political officials valued it very much. It is believed that its combat effectiveness is a little higher than Germany's own navy. We believe we can increase support for Italy, such as providing interest-free loans or technical support, etc. Facing the Emperor's inquiry, Prime Minister Billow gave the government's suggestions. Our military believes that the exchange of military technology between the two countries can be increased. The same can be done in the field of tactical research, and we can even discuss military cooperation and other issues with them. The Chief of General Staff, General Moltke, also made suggestions to the Emperor on behalf of the military. After he finished speaking, he looked at Tirpitz specifically. William II also saw Moltke's little actions. It was obvious that for the sake of consensus, a certain party made some concessions. At present, it seems that the Navy has made some concessions, since both the government and the military strongly demand deepening the alliance with the Italians. How could he, the monarch, object, since you all said so? Then these conditions can be put forward for tomorrow's talks. I think the Italians will be moved. William II's words set the tone for tomorrow's talks with the German side. Of course, they made the German side pay more attention to it. They are also the result of Italy's efforts over the years. From being disliked at the beginning, to being scrambled to win over now, this is all the result of the substantial increase in Italy's national strength. In this era, weakness is the original sin, and all countries implement this principal point. While the German side is making plans for tomorrow's talks, the Italian side is also doing the same thing. Your Majesty, the Germans showed too little sincerity in today's talks, and cannot meet our demands at all. In the room, Prime Minister Antonio reported the content of today's talks to Carlo, who had returned. In addition to the Prime Minister and the King, all the important officials of the delegation were there. Yes, Your Majesty, Germany has shown too little sincerity, and is an enemy of the British Empire. At present, our country is not ready at all. Admiral Yagia, the Minister of the Navy, who was in the limelight during the talks, also took the opportunity to make remarks. Admiral Yagia is right. We have no preparations. It is too early to talk about this matter now. Chief of General Staff General Simeon also said the same point. Carlo could see it. Although his important ministers gave various reasons, it was obvious that this was a sign of their lack of confidence in being an enemy of Britain. That's right. They were afraid of the majesty of the British Empire. Carlo understood the lack of confidence of the important ministers very well. After all, Britain has been famous for hundreds of years, and Spain, the Netherlands, France, and Russia have all experienced the consequences of challenges. Especially during the Napoleonic era, France, which commanded the rise of Europe, also failed to overthrow Britain's position. How could Italy dare to compete with the British Empire, even if there were Germans sharing the pressure? Facing the concerns of his ministers, Carlo certainly needed to give him some confidence. You are right. If you want to increase the terms against the UK, then the conditions provided by Germany are indeed a bit less. At least the two countries need to strengthen their naval strength. Germany needs to have at least the strength to hold back 80% of the British Navy. The 80% that Carlo mentioned is the result of careful calculation by the Italian Navy. In view of the situation in the Mediterranean, the Italian Navy believes that it must gain an advantage when facing the French Navy and the British Mediterranean Fleet. This is the key to ensuring Italy's control of the sea and the Mediterranean point, because the Mediterranean is so important that if Italy loses control of the sea, it will mean defeat. Domestic factories lacking raw materials will come to a standstill, and the lack of imported food will lead to popular riots. Therefore, when facing a war, Italy first needs to consider sea control. Without control of the sea, there is no need to fight this war. Even if we suffer some losses, we must realize this. Facing Carlo's words, these important ministers also agreed very much, because this is the situation that Italy must face at present, Your Majesty. In the following talks, our main goal will be on Germany, to contain the British Navy. In addition, we plan to let Germany open up more restricted technologies during talks with it, whether it is military or civilian technology. Prime Minister Antonio stated to Carlo the focus of the upcoming talks. Carlo also knew the intention of the Prime Minister's words. Generally speaking, Italy currently seems to have good technological development, and has good technologies in internal combustion engines, electric power, petrochemicals, shipbuilding and other industries. However, in addition to these technological industries with outstanding performance, there are more industries in Italy that are technologically lagging behind. According to the barrel theory, how much water can be filled depends on the shortest board. Therefore, if Italy wants to develop healthily, it needs to make up for its shortcomings. It is very important to introduce more technologies from Germany. No problem. The next talks will be based on what the Prime Minister said. Faced with specific talks, Carlo safely handed them over to his ministers at this time. Admiral Yager interjected. The Austrians can't let it go either. I heard they are also preparing to build a dreadnought. Admiral Simone, who knew the elegant meaning from the dazzling sound, immediately spoke. Do you want to incorporate it into your command in the future? I have this idea. After all, Austria-Hungary is also a Mediterranean country. Only by concentrating its strength can we defeat possible powerful enemies in the future. Well, the Admiral paid attention to the Austrians. Also, added to the upcoming talks, facing Admiral Yager's suggestion, Carlo also agreed. Chapter 519 The Three Emperors Talk. End. The talks in Sanssouci Palace became more intense as Italy took Austria-Hungary into account. Your country is a little too impatient to include our country's unfinished warships. The speaker was His Excellency Count Irenthal, the chief representative of the Austro-Hungarian delegation, the foreign minister, who leads public affairs as the chairman of the Council of Ministers, and can also be counted as the prime minister. It was already the 6th day of negotiations for him, who had always been a spectator. Being suddenly asked by Italy to form a joint fleet was hard for Count Irenthal to endure. What's more, the Italians also demand wartime command, which is even more intolerable. Therefore, his tough tone and angry expression clearly demonstrated the dissatisfaction of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Facing Count Irenthal's performance as the host of this meeting, Prime Minister Billow has already seen through it all. The Austrians are not really dissatisfied when they behave like this. They are mostly waiting for benefits from them. Sure enough, the Earl of Irenthal continued immediately. If you want our country to accept your country's conditions, then your country must provide compensation. Although Count Irenthal said these words to the Italian side, for some reason, Biro always had a feeling that these words should be directed at himself. Has your country asked the wrong person for compensation from our country? Besides, your country is not a Mediterranean country. Doesn't it need to guarantee sea control? If we really encounter a war and our navies cannot jointly fight, then that's a real tragedy. Italian Prime Minister Antonio unceremoniously refuted the Austrians' remarks. But why did these words sound so weird? It was obvious that the conversation between these two men was directed at the Germans. Because after the two men spoke, they unabashedly looked at Billow, who had been sitting there like a mountain, and it was obvious that they were waiting for this reply. Facing the staring eyes, how could Billow not know what these two people were thinking? But it is not easy for him to speak. As the German Prime Minister, it would be a joke if he was so easily squeezed out by his two colleagues. Seeing that they failed to win over the German Prime Minister, the two men stopped pretending. Your Excellency Biro, what do you think of this moment? Count Irenthal asked directly by naming them. Yes, I also want to hear Mr. Billow's opinion. Antonio from the Italian side also expressed his thoughts. Facing the inquiries from the heads of government of the two allied countries, Billow knew that it would be impossible not to answer, so he just opened his mouth and said, both of you, I think this is a very good decision for the two countries to form a joint fleet in the Mediterranean. This will help integrate the strength of our alliance in the Mediterranean and deter potential enemies. We in Germany are also very willing to see it. The two allies formed a joint fleet in the Mediterranean, which in itself was very beneficial to Germany. Not only can it contain the maritime power of Britain and France, but it can also reduce the antagonism between Italy and Austria, which is beneficial to the overall situation of the alliance. However, although Billow is very optimistic about the Italians' proposal, these two people who want to benefit from Germany are probably thinking too much. I saw Billow continue to speak. I think that, since it is a union of navies, then the navies should be the ones to negotiate. I think the navies of the two countries should know better how to negotiate, right? Billow was good at take-eye and left the problem to the navies of the two countries. But although he had a good idea, others were not vegetarians, so Count Lenthal said, "Your Excellency Billow, we are indeed talking about the issue of naval union at present, but this is not just the navy, but also involves other aspects. The navy alone cannot achieve this, so it is best for us to talk about it. Our country thinks the same way." Antonio tacitly assisted. Facing the naked and undisguised intentions of these two men, Biro smiled bitterly, because he knew that this time it would be impossible without some blood. When they talked with Italy about including the British Empire as a potential enemy, Germany paid a heavy price. In addition to opening up more technologies, an interest-free loan of 1 billion marks and some concessions on tariffs have made Italy a huge profit. Of course, these are not important reasons. The most important reason is that the two countries have reached a consensus on naval issues. In the future, the German Navy must reach 70% of the British Empire in terms of main battleship ratio. This can be regarded as a concession by Italy to provide many benefits to Germany. Of course, as part of the price, Italy will also, in accordance with the treaty, be responsible for containing some of its forces on land when Germany is at war with Italy's neighboring countries. Although the treaty did not specify who it was, who else could be on the land border with Italy? It couldn't be Switzerland or the Balkan children and the new land. When the talks with Germany were almost complete, Italy subsequently proposed the formation of a combined Mediterranean fleet. This is a good thing for Germany and Italy, but it is hard to say for Austria-Hungary. First of all, the Austro-Hungarian coastline is not long, and Italy, which has a stronger navy, is holding up the front. In addition, there are still some disputes between Austria-Hungary and Italy, so Austria-Hungary is actually not very willing. However, considering that competing for interests in the Balkans requires support from Germany and Italy, it is purely normal to take some benefits. However, Austria-Hungary wanted to get benefits, while Italy did not want to pay the money, so the two parties felt that the matter was difficult to negotiate, so they targeted Germany. Whoever makes this adjustment to the alliance will benefit the most from Germany. Who else to look for? I don't know what conditions Count Lenthal wants to put forward. If it is too high, we cannot afford it. Biro finally relented. There was no way anyone could make Germany the core. According to popular terms, it was the identity of the alliance leader. Since it was the alliance leader, it could not be as fussy as Italy and Austria. It must have the responsibility of the alliance leader. Obviously, these two people also figured out that Germany must take responsibility, so they tacitly kicked the dispute to Billow. Of course, Billow also gave a request, and the lion cannot speak too loudly, otherwise Germany will not be willing to be taken advantage of. After receiving the acquiescence of the Germans, Count Lenthal immediately spoke. "We think it would be good if there was an interest-free loan of 100 million marks over 10 years. Well, this Austrian is already an own star and no longer hides himself. This requires Billow, who is the German Prime Minister, to also give him a thumbs up. The Austrian is really stuck just right, just at the bottom line of Germany's psychology. If it goes more, he will refuse. Yes, our country agrees. Billow didn't bargain and just agreed. Now Germany's purpose of hosting this meeting has been achieved. After the main goal is achieved, the next step is some finishing work. The three countries also spent a lot of time talking about these finishing work. Finally, after the three monarchs, crown princes, played around for nearly a month, the renewed alliance treaty was finally negotiated, and the three monarchs, crown princes, each signed their names. After signing the treaty, the Italian and Austrian negotiating delegations who came from afar needed to rush back to their respective countries. After all, these important ministers had been away for almost a month and needed to go back to continue managing their respective departments. But for some people, leaving is a bit sad. Sister Louise, come to Rome when you have time. I will miss you. On the tightly protected platform, Vittorio, the Crown Prince of Italy, was saying a sad farewell to the Kaiser's youngest daughter, Princess Louise. Brother Vittorio, I will miss you too. The Kaiser's little cotton padded jacket also said goodbye to the Crown Prince with red eyes. As for the adults on the side, they were also saying goodbye. Goodbye, William. Goodbye, Carlo. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 520 Transaction. Rome is a famous historical city and also a famous political and economic city. For many Italians, being able to visit Rome has always been their wish point. The wishes of ordinary people are nothing to the big shots. Not only did the delegation, which had just returned from Germany, drag their exhausted bodies off the special train they were on, it was already the time when the lights were on, and most of the members of the returning delegation were eager to return home. However, there are exceptions, such as Prime Minister Antonio, who is not in a hurry to go home at this time. To the Home Secretary's house. The driver did not dare to interfere with the Prime Minister's order and drove directly to the home of Interior Secretary Cruz. The Beat neighborhood next to the Seven Hills is an upscale neighborhood in Rome. Those who can live here are either rich or noble. Interior Secretary Cruz lives here. At this moment, a car drove to the door, and Prime Minister Antonio walked out of the car. This is a relatively exquisite 3-story building. The flowers blooming in the yard give it a sense of leisure and contentment, but it seems extremely ordinary in this neighborhood. Prime Minister, I'm going to knock on the door. No, I'll do it myself. Rejecting the driver's help, Antonio came to the door himself and knocked on the door. There was a crisp knock on the door, and soon the door opened. Excuse me, this is Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Coming quickly, thanks. Although the butler has never met Antonio before, as the butler of the Secretary of the Interior, how could he not know him? Newspapers, photos, public gatherings, etc. are all channels through which he can know him. Prime Minister, welcome to your presence. Cruz, who is the Secretary of the Interior, immediately came out after hearing the butler's words. Although he was surprised in his heart that the Prime Minister actually came to his home, his face was filled with a smile like seeing an old friend. He fully demonstrated the basic qualities of a political figure. Excuse me, Cruz, I just took the liberty to pay you a visit when I was passing by. Hahaha, if the Prime Minister can come to my place, it will be a great success. People who don't know must think that these two are old friends getting together on a daily basis. Who would know that the two of them don't have much contact with each other? This is the first time that the Prime Minister has come to the Home Secretary's home. After briefly introducing his family, Cruz took the visiting Prime Minister to his study, while the butler waited outside to prevent anyone from approaching. Handing the Prime Minister a glass of red wine, Cruz poured himself one. Try wine from my hometown. Antonio took a sip and felt that the taste was average and a bit astringent. Not bad. Hahaha. Prime Minister, you are the first person to say that my red wine is good. Many people don't like this slightly bitter red wine, but I like it very much because the sweetness left after the bitterness makes it even more satisfying. People cherish it. Antonio didn't know whether Cruz was talking about red wine or himself. At this point, Cruz suddenly changed the subject. Prime Minister, is this sudden visit because you want to taste my wine? Faced with Cruz's somewhat wary words, Antonio smiled. Of course not. When I come to visit this time, I do have something I need to discuss with you. In response to the Prime Minister's words, Cruz did not speak. It was obvious that he was waiting for the Prime Minister to continue speaking. I plan to ask the cabinet chief to resign and start elections early. Antonio didn't hide it and directly reported the purpose of coming here. PFFT. Cough, cough, cough. Faced With such shocking content, all the red wine in Cruz's mouth was wasted. Prime Minister, are you kidding me? It's no wonder that Cruz was shocked, because the news was so shocking. The Prime Minister planned to hold an early election. There must be some intentional problem. Because the government is currently functioning well, with no major faults, and no major crises. Everything is calm and peaceful. Cruz really doesn't understand why the Prime Minister suddenly set off such a huge wave on his own point. Faced with Cruz's wary eyes, Antonio smiled bitterly inwardly. Although he was not very familiar with the Interior Minister, he could basically guess what the other party was thinking just by the surprise in his eyes. Speaking of which, 3 months ago, Antonio would not have thought that he would talk to the National Socialist Party so quickly, but there are some things that he must solve as soon as possible. What made Antonio retreat was the newly negotiated Three Kingdoms alliance. As a fairly good politician, Antonio certainly knew what this renewal was about. It can be said that the signing of the alliance renewal represents a closer unity between Germany, Italy, and Austria, and what they need to confront is a gradually forming three countries of Britain, France, and Russia. It is obvious that this kind of confrontation between countries will be more dangerous, and based on his understanding of His Majesty, since Italy has participated, it will definitely go all out. The currently healthy Italian finances will immediately become unable to make ends meet. Yes, Italy's finances are currently very healthy, second only to the United Kingdom among the powerful countries in Europe. At present Italy's military expenditure accounts for only 25.8% of its finances, which is only 0.7% higher than that of the British Empire. Except for Britain and Italy, the other four countries have reached more than 30%. Among them, Allied Germany has the highest proportion of military expenditure, and its military expenditure accounts for an astonishing 41.2% of total fiscal revenue. This also explains Germany's current situation. It has to compete with France and Russia on land, and compete with Britain on the sea. This requires a lot of money, and it also needs allies to help share the pressure. However, with the end of the trip to Germany, Italy, which signed a new contract, has inevitably joined them. Then large investments in the military are inevitable, and large investments in military expenditures will inevitably increase government expenditures. A substantial increase in military spending will inevitably lead to the government needing to cut a lot of spending, and this may not be enough. According to Antonio's judgment, the government must find a way to support its large-scale military expansion in Italy, and the only two options that can be thought of besides borrowing debt are to increase taxes. And it is very likely that the government will use both methods at the same time. Cutting welfare expenditures, borrowing heavily, and increasing taxes are all three methods that are difficult for Antonio to handle, let alone all three at the same time. The left-wing party he leads will not be able to cause an uproar and cause the party to split. Inevitable. But this matter must be done, because this is the current mainstream desire in the country. The people who have been mobilized to have national self-confidence, and the monarch hope that Italy can play a key role in the future. As the leader of a left-wing party, Antonio needs to consider his own governing base and cannot deviate from his support base. You must know that he is left-wing and right-wing, not right-wing and left-wing. Instead of being thrown out of office in despair when the situation is in chaos, it is better to make a deal now. At present, the only party that can make deals or replace the left-wing parties is the far-right National Socialist Party led by Interior Secretary Cruz, and this is the main reason why Antonio appears at Cruz's house. Looking at Antonio's eyes, Cruz realized that this was not a joke, but serious at this moment. Cruz immediately felt his heart beating violently, and an incredible feeling surged into his heart. Sir Antonio, what do you or your party want? Chapter 521 Phase Change. The stars in the night sky in Rome twinkle, and a car drives in the middle of the night. In the backseat of the car, Antonio rubbed his forehead and looked out the window at the beautiful night view. The negotiation with Cruz did not go too smoothly. Antonio spent a lot of energy on this, but no results were achieved. Antonio didn't think there was any problem with this. It would be impossible to negotiate a result the first time. The main purpose of his visit this time is to let the National Socialist Party know his attitude. Specific negotiations will take place several times in the future. Soon, a familiar house appeared in front of him. This was his home. The Prime Minister has arrived. New. Antonio got out of the car and walked into the room, greeted by the butler. Ma'am, are they asleep? Yes. Antonio washed up a little, walked into the room quietly, and his sleeping wife next to him squinted. Maybe he was too tired, and after a while Antonio also fell asleep. In the following days, with the return of important ministers, the government was busy dealing with the squeeze. As for the Prime Minister, in addition to handling government affairs, he also needs to take time to discuss with the National Socialists headed by Interior Secretary Cruz. Of course, in addition to the Prime Minister, there are also senior leftists. In order to convince the top leaders of the party, Antonio also took great pains, pulling these people one by one to have a heart-to-heart talk. As for the effect, it was pretty good. As Antonio continued to tell facts and reason, the party's top leaders also recognized the facts. They could not continue to govern after offending the king and blocking the prying eyes of the National Socialist Party. In this case, there is nothing wrong with making a deal with the National Socialist Party. This is called strategic retreat, preserving the strength to wait for new opportunities. Don't think that there is a big feud between the left and right political parties. Although the ideologies are different, the struggle between the two parties is not too fierce under the pressure or control of the king. This also fully shows that, as long as the highest power does not fall into competition, parties in struggle will be greatly restrained. After all, it is not too much to go too far if someone above is watching. In fact, the exchange of interests is not unacceptable to the National Socialist Party. The current National Socialist Party is no longer what it was a few years ago. Although I cannot say that it can guarantee the superb ability to govern, years of study and experience have given the National Socialist Party the courage to govern and the confidence to govern. Of course, the National Socialist Party is also quite happy with the exchange proposed by the left-wing parties, and the only difference between them and the left-wing parties is the amount of exchange benefits. Of course, the two major parties also know that it is not easy to reach an agreement, but on both sides, despite the intention, the negotiations actually went very quickly, and a preliminary agreement was basically reached within a week. According to the agreement, the National Socialist Party promised not to cancel several welfare bills passed by left-wing parties after taking power, the most important of which was the insurance bill. This bill requires companies to purchase insurance for their employees, and the introduction of the insurance bill has benefited millions of workers in one fell swoop. Although corporate and factory owners have a lot of opposition to this, it was forcibly passed under the organization of left-wing parties at that time. The left-wing parties also paid a heavy price for the smooth passage of the bill. In addition to the exchange of interests between political parties, in order to reduce opposition, the government also participates in purchasing insurance for workers. The three parties pay according to the ratio of 3-4-3, and this allows the government to gain a financial expenditure of hundreds of millions of liras per year. As for the left-wing parties, in view of the relationship between the National Socialist Party and those corporate and factory owners, as well as the huge expenses caused by future military expansion, it is necessary for the National Socialist Party to maintain these welfare bills. Don't think that this is because the left-wing parties are selfless and only focus on the welfare of the people. The continued implementation of these welfare bills can make the people remember the contributions of the left-wing parties and attract more knowledgeable people to join. Your Majesty, according to our investigation, the left-wing parties and the National Socialist Party have almost reached an agreement. This is the result of their talks in a secret room in the palace. A middle-aged man submitted a piece of information to Carlo. Carlo took the information expressionlessly and then read it carefully. Carlo had always been very wary of the National Socialist Party, which he supported with one hand, so they had secret talks with the left-wing parties, and Carlo soon found out, and he immediately ordered Pierre, the leader of the kingdom's secret agents, to keep an eye on him. He needed to know the contents of the secret conversation as soon as possible. Carlo's expression made the secret agent dare not express his anger. For a moment, except for the sound of reading, the secret room seemed to be silent. Okay, get out. The Words, like the sound of nature, liberated the intelligence chief. Yes, your majesty. After saluting, this person was ready to leave. The National Socialist Party needs continued attention. As you command, your majesty. As the door closed, the room became quiet again, except for the occasional sound of paper flipping. Alas, I don't know how long it took, but a sigh brought vitality to the silent room. Carlo put down the document he had read and rubbed his aching temples. Snapped a lit cigarette is held in Carlo's hand. This is a way for him to reduce stress. The occasional stimulation of nicotine can make him feel less tired. Antonio is such a cunning old man. He has a really keen sense of smell. Complaining about the outgoing prime minister at this time is really just a complaint for Carlo. Although the prime minister disrupted his plan, he could only complain to the other party in his heart when no one was around. Because this is politics. Although he is the king, this is not a game. Others are not NPCs. Everyone has their own ideas, so how can they act according to their own wishes? Although he is not yet ready to launch the National Socialist Party, but now that the left-wing parties have played such a trick, it is impossible not to launch it. When he thought of this, Carlo, who felt like he was being tricked by Antonio, was so happy. But it is useless to say this now. Although it is still a bit hasty, it seems that it is impossible to prevent the National Socialist Party from coming to power. Thinking of this, he picked up the phone. Chief of Guards, call Interior Secretary Cruz and tell him that I want to summon him now. Putting down the phone, Carlo began to think about the next conversation with the future Prime Minister. Although he has performed very well in the position of Home Secretary, the position of Prime Minister is much more difficult than that of Home Secretary. I don't know whether the other party can do a good job. As for Cruz, after receiving the order from the king, he immediately rushed to the palace by car. This time the king's summons was unusual because no one knew what the two men talked about. Throughout the summons, the attendant stayed away from the room. Cruz, who came out after the summons, was also tight-lipped and refused to speak even when asked by other high-level officials in the party. Just as many people were pondering this strange summons from the king, a major earthquake in the political world attracted everyone's attention. Prime Minister Antonio suddenly submitted the resignation of the cabinet to the king, and a new cabinet election battle came so unexpectedly. Many political parties were mobilized urgently to get a piece of the electoral pie. For a time, the city of Rome was in a turmoil, and good shows like You Sing and I Go on Stage were staged one after another, which added a lot of talk for the people of Rome before tea and after dinner. Chapter 522 Prime Minister Cruz. We won. Great. We win. Party leader. We can form a government. Who would have thought that our National Socialist Party could actually form a government? When the results of the parliamentary election came out, the National Socialist Party won a resounding victory thanks to the efforts of all parties. The top leaders of the National Socialist Party cheered for this. As the leader of the National Socialist Party, Cruz was not as excited as others when faced with such good news. The reason is simple. There is a big test waiting for the National Socialist Party members who want to come to power. The king's request is that the National Socialist Party needs to steadily increase military expenditures to 50% of the total government revenue within 3 years. This requirement is not low at all. You must know that normal military expenditures generally account for up to 20%. This 50% requirement is only possible by preparing for war. It was obvious that the king wanted to prepare Italy for war. Regarding the attitude towards war, the National Socialist Party is not opposed to it, and even supports it. But now there is a small problem, that is, the time given by the king is too short, and preparations for war are made within 3 years. This is very difficult for the National Socialist Party, which came to power for the first time. After all, this is the first time for the National Socialist Party to be in power. Although Cruz, the party leader, has already had the experience of taking charge of a department, he has not yet done so from the perspective of overall control. In addition, with the addition of other senior officials of the state society like Zinguadanzi, it is not easy to support the operation of the government and avoid problems. Originally, Cruz planned to take half a year to let the top leaders of the National Socialist Party gradually adapt to the work of cabinet ministers, and then start to avoid problems such as stagnation in the government. But in the current situation, half a year is too generous, and at most 3 months. I have to get started, and I can't afford to wait until time passes. Of course, these thoughts are still swelling in Cruz's mind, and he needs to inform his comrades in the party at the right time. As for now, after winning the general election, of course the most critical thing is to form a government. When it comes to forming a cabinet, it goes without saying that the Prime Minister is none other than Cruz. As for the candidates for the cabinet ministers, the National Socialist Party has endless choices. The king and other parties need to share some of the profits. Therefore, among the 11 internal ministers on the surface, only 6 positions can actually be allocated to the National Socialist Party. Among them, only internal affairs, education, and finance are considered to have high weight, and the other 3 positions can only be considered weak. Don't think that this position is missing. Even when the left-wing party led by Antonio was in power, there were only 9 people under its control. For a new member of the National Socialist Party, being given 6 positions is already pretty good. Only after he has achieved results will he be qualified to discuss requirements. Everyone, our victory in the election today is the result of the hard work of all members of the party. We must not let down everyone's expectations. Cruz said these words to the excited looking National Socialists around him. While Cruz, the leader of the National Socialist Party, was boosting the morale of party members, news about the victory of the National Socialist Party also spread. Regarding the news of the victory of the National Socialist Party, the left-wing parties have complicated thoughts. It is indeed not a good feeling to send their political opponents to power. However, apart from bringing the National Socialist Party to power, the left-wing parties are in a dilemma and have no other good solution. Otherwise they will not accept Antonio's suggestion. If the left-wing parties have complicated thoughts, then the right-wing parties are even less so. They hate and are angry at the National Socialist Party coming to power. I'm not wrong. I just feel hateful and angry, and there is no element of praise in it. Although the National Socialist Party is a right-wing party, compared with these old rightists, the National Socialist Party is considered an alternative. They are driven, idealistic and motivated, and they frequently engage in political rallies, parades and other activities, which completely shows that other right-wing parties lack vitality. Of course, it doesn't matter if it's just like this. It just looks different and everyone just looks at it. The key is that after these activities of the National Socialist Party, the number of members in the party has continued to rise, and it has now become the largest single party in Italy. As for the growth of the National Socialist Party, more than half of its members were recruited from right-wing parties. Political parties also have interests, and the biggest competition for interests is the competition for talents. The National Socialist Party's approach is undoubtedly poaching right-wing parties. Who can tolerate this kind of thing? It is not that there are no political parties who want to copy the National Socialist Party's tactics. Why is the word imitating others the most appropriate? In addition to attracting ridicule from the National Socialist Party media, the effect was better than nothing, and a large sum of money was squandered. This is the most uncomfortable thing about right-wing political parties. There is no point in learning from others. If you don't learn from others, you will have to watch yourself being sucked by others. Now others have reached the peak of their lives. This feeling is very crazy. The National Socialist Party now has no interest in knowing what the parties on the left and right think about it. Because, after learning the news of their party's victory, the National Socialist Party organized a series of activities in Florence, the birthplace of the National Socialist Party. When the news of the election victory reached here, the Florence branch immediately organized a march. Tens of thousands of people walked on the streets in the dark, holding torches high. They sang the party anthem of the National Socialist Party for Italy, and rallied together for this election victory. Of course, in addition to Florence, there were also National Socialist Party parades and gatherings in other cities. For example, more than 20,000 people participated in the rally in Milan, and more than 10,000 people participated in the victory parade in Venice. There were relatively few people participating in the demonstrations and rallies in the north. In the south, where there were more members of the National Socialist Party, the momentum was magnificent. In Palermo, 70,000 National Socialist Party members marched. The largest number of National Socialist Party parades and gatherings was in Naples, the southern stronghold, where 120,000 National Socialist Party members gathered to march and rally for their coming to power. The astonishing momentum surprised many Naples officials, and Mayor Verola reported to Rome. No one said much about the victory parades and gatherings of the National Socialist Party in various places. After all, this was not an excessive reaction, and there were no security problems. Of course, the more important thing is the inauguration ceremony of the new Prime Minister. Although Italy also has a cabinet system, it has heavy feudal remnants. Although it does not have a dual monarchy as blatant as Germany, it is not much better. The feudal remnants, headed by King Carlo, still firmly control the power of the kingdom, allowing political parties to carry out political activities only within their defined limits. For example, the king has the power to annul the submitted candidate for prime minister and call for new elections. Although the king never used that power, no one could forget it. For the new prime minister Cruz, although he has already been recognized by the king, he can only breathe a sigh of relief until the submitted cabinet plan is approved by the king. After the cabinet plan was approved, the new prime minister immediately held his first cabinet meeting. Time is tight and there is not much time to waste. Chapter 523 Benefits. Cruz has been to the prime minister's office many times, but coming as a host, this different feeling makes the new prime minister feel unusual. Every plant and tree here feels different from before. Of course, what is even more unusual is the difference in status. Prime Minister, Your Excellency. Prime Minister, Your Majesty. Prime Minister. In the conference room of the Prime Minister's office, the new and remaining cabinet ministers greeted Cruz. The attitude they showed invisibly was very revealing. Everyone, Cruz, looked at the many faces in front of him. These are the candidates for his next cabinet and the pillars of the future government. This is the first cabinet meeting that I have chaired. I also believe that everyone here has the desire to dedicate their efforts to the kingdom. I also have this. I hope that in the future, you can cooperate sincerely to make the kingdom a better place. Build stronger. Although the opening speech of the meeting was brief, it was carefully refined by Cruz. On the one hand, he expressed his thoughts on governing, and on the other hand, he also expressed his expectations for the cabinet. Bang bang. Unsurprisingly, the applause was the response of cabinet ministers to the new prime minister. Cruz signaled for the applause to stop, and the conference room fell silent. Everyone, let's move on to today's proposal. Some changes in taxation. As Cruz finished speaking, the eyes of everyone present showed surprise. This is the first meeting of the new cabinet. Isn't it time for everyone to meet each other? Are they familiar with each other? Why do they have to discuss things so soon? As the sun gradually turned westward, cabinet ministers walked out of the door of the prime minister's office one after another. Everyone had the same expression on their face, looking serious. This has clearly told others that there is something wrong with this first meeting today. There are indeed problems. In addition to taxation, we also discussed several bills at today's meeting. These bills are all related to people's livelihood. The cabinet ministers still couldn't figure out the prime minister's unreasonable behavior, and the prime minister's proposals were not passed. The prime minister didn't seem to care too much about this, and it was more like coming up with proposals. Let everyone know. The ministers will definitely not be able to sleep well after today's meeting, and they must think about the prime minister's intentions for this. Of course, some people can sleep. For example, representatives of the Navy and Army will not be bothered by this matter. Admiral Yaji, why don't you come and sit at my place? General Simeon, the Minister of War, walked out of the Prime Minister's office and extended an invitation to his naval colleagues. Okay, how about trying the coffee from your army department? Yaji accepted Simeon's invitation immediately. As for whether he wanted to taste the coffee, only these two people knew. The very conspicuous 5-story building on Kochi Street is the new office of the War Department. The building was the last project prepared by the old Field Marshal Cardona while he was still alive. Since it was the old marshal's last wish, the construction speed of this new building could not be slowed down. In the second year after the old marshal passed away, the new army office building was completed. Try our army coffee. In the office, Simone was greeting Yagia warmly. It Tastes pretty good, not that bad. After taking a sip, Yaji commented on the coffee in a decent manner. It seems that the reputation of our army coffee is not good in the navy. Chatting like they were bragging was certainly not the intention of the two leaders of the navy and army. No, Simeon, who took the initiative to invite the other party, is not so polite or is not so particular. Admiral Yaji, what do you think about the next financial allocation? Seeing the Minister of War talking about serious matters, Yaji immediately looked shocked and said, how else can we look at it? The next allocation from the Ministry of Finance will definitely be tilted towards your army, and our navy can only pick up the leftovers. Although there is no news from the government, and the discussion has not even started yet. But who are these two people? They have long known that the government will shift its focus to arms expansion and war preparations. However, although it is to expand the army and prepare for war, it also has a focus unlike before. The army had the last laugh this time in its military expansion and war preparations. According to instructions given by someone in the palace, the next expansion of the army is mainly aimed at the army. The army needs to gradually expand the current 320,000 troops to 600,000. The final plan is that after Italy has a conflict with a neighboring country in the future, Italy can complete war preparations for 1 million troops in 1 month, 1.5 million troops within 3 months, and 2 million troops within 1 year. It is noted that this army expansion plan needs to ensure that the expanded troops are fully equipped and well trained. This means that the Italian army must have all kinds of equipment and supplies at all times. To support the use of 1.5 million troops, this is a huge expense, and the army needs to purchase weapons, ammunition, and equipment to equip so many people. In addition, personnel training, reserve construction and other tasks also carry heavy responsibilities. It can be said that the army has already begun preparations for military expansion. And this time Simone invited Admiral Yaji to come, and he also had a purpose. Admiral Yaji, although our army will benefit more from this expansion, I don't know if you have noticed it. Coupled with the expansion of your navy, the kingdom has prepared to invest all available resources in our army. Having said this, Simeon looked at the other person and continued, we are all soldiers. Of course we know why the kingdom has invested so much money in the past. So who do you think our next target is? French or Austrian? Faced with Simone's inquiry, Admiral Yaji gave his own answer. However, Simone was not satisfied with the Admiralty's answer. Your Excellency Agile, is it necessary to be so cautious with this answer? Simone walked to the wall with the map and said, according to the current situation, there are two alliances in Europe. Britain, France, and Russia are against us, and Germany and Austria. The current expansion of the kingdom's army is directed towards the confrontation between the alliances. First of all, the key point of this confrontation is in the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean is bound to it as our country that has become the main force. Yaji did not deny Simeon's words. The Mediterranean has been key in many simulations of European confrontations conducted within the navy. The reason lies in the Suez Canal, the Strait of Gibraltar and the Black Sea Strait, which make the Mediterranean a convenient sea lane connecting North Africa, Eastern Europe and Asia. Whoever controls the Mediterranean will have the initiative in future confrontations, so our military must express a sufficient attitude. If it participates in this confrontation, it must ensure that the kingdom receives sufficient benefits. Our army believes that Corsica, Savoy and Nice will become an integral part of the kingdom. In addition, Tunisia and Egypt must also be respected. Isn't this the job of the foreign secretary? Isn't it a bad idea to express such a position? Faced with Yaji's words, Simone immediately spoke. We are not involved in diplomatic work, but are expressing the military's attitude. Is this wrong? Simone's words made Yaji a little moved. This kind of direct statement of the military's attitude is indeed very attractive. If this is the case, then our navy believes that Malta and Tunisia should be an integral part of the kingdom. As for Egypt, the interests of the kingdom must also be respected. Fortunately, these two were still relatively sober and had not thought about bringing Egypt into the arms of the kingdom. Chapter 524 Whites 1. With the new Prime Minister Cruz taking office, Rome has fallen into a new political whirlpool, and the people of Rome can get new things to talk about everyday point. However, today in the spring breeze, no one in Rome is talking about politics, because today people have new things to talk about. It's truly spectacular, a miracle. Yes, it's God's work. It's just spectacular. I saw it flying through the sky, and its shadow on the ground was bigger than my neighborhood. Today, in Rome, everyone is talking excitedly about the same thing, or the same aviation machine, an airship that looks like a cigar. People in Rome are actually no strangers to airships, because Alitalia has more than 10 airships. Everyone has seen these big guys that are 100 meters long and fly around in the sky point, but this time, this big ship is really extraordinary. No one has ever seen an airship nearly 300 meters long. This is enough to become a new talking point for everyone. It is really too big. What a wonderful masterpiece. In the 150-hectare airport on the outskirts of Rome, as the main promoter of the construction of giant airships, Alitalia General Manager Arman looked up at the huge airship and introduced it to others. This is our new masterpiece of Alitalia, the Swan Intercontinental Airship. The boat is 291 meters long, 48.9 meters in diameter, and has a volume of 267,000 cubic meters. It is equipped with 4 Naples 1100 horsepower diesel engines, and has a top speed of 125 kilometers per hour. Currently the largest industrial crystallization in the world. Next to Arman were a group of Italian celebrities and gentlemen. Even they, who were well informed, looked at the snow-white giant airship Swan with expressions of surprise. So, how many people are needed to operate this type of airship, and how many people and cargo can it carry at one time? A well-dressed gentleman looked at the airship and asked, point-faced with this question. Arman replied, President Breezale, the airship has 24 operators, plus 18 waiters, and can carry up to 60 passengers and 8 tons of cargo. However, given that this is the first intercontinental voyage, we are only prepared to sell 36 Zhangqingxiao. After all, we still adhere to the concept of safety first when using airships to sail around the world. At this time, a bald middle-aged man complained, "You only sold 36 tickets, and you only sold 12 in Italy. Even I didn't get it, which is incredible." Faced with these words, Arman smiled slightly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Marco, I can't help you with this, because I don't have tickets in my hand. I believe you all know how popular the tickets for the Swan airship are at the moment. After the round-the-world voyage is completed, the Swan will be put into service in the Americas and Europe on a triangular voyage. Think about it, it only takes 3 days for an airship to fly from Europe to North America. Compared with cruise ships, it is much faster. Moreover, airships are much more comfortable and can also see the scenery from the air. In the future, airships will become an intercontinental travel destination. First choice for sailing. It is expected that the Swan airship will recover its cost in only 4 to 5 years, and our company will increase its investment in intercontinental routes so that more people can enjoy the fun of air travel." Arman's words made many people think deeply. Intercontinental sailing has always been a hot business. In recent years, major shipping companies have launched their own cruise ships just to get a piece of the pie. Before, everyone was fighting for it at sea. Currently, only Alitalia is competing in the air. If this first airline tries to take advantage of the competition, it will definitely be a mouthful. Some people are already interested in this. Facing the scene in front of him, Arman added another fire. "Everyone, let me tell you another piece of good news. Currently, all 36 tickets for the Swan airship's round-the-world voyage have been sold out. A total of 1.04 million liras have been sold so far. Each ticket for this round-the-world voyage costs more than £1,000, which seems to be dozens of times more expensive than a first-class cabin on a luxury cruise ship. However, considering that rich people usually travel with luxury packages, it is not much more expensive. Take the Titanic as an example. The ticket price for a suite with a private balcony is as high as £870. Passengers can enjoy luxurious facilities such as a heated swimming pool, gym, squash court, Turkish bath, sunbathing deck, etc. for first-class passengers. Even pet dogs have special facilities. Kennel, of course. The Swan does not have such a large space to arrange luxurious facilities, but one is aviation and the other is shipping. In this initial stage of the aviation industry, there is no comparison between the two. Being able to travel safely by airship is simply a super-class enjoyment. If you also want facilities such as a swimming pool and gym, you are overthinking it. Gentlemen, let's go into the airship and take a look. With the help of the staff, Armin led everyone into the interior of the Swan. Everyone visited a series of facilities such as the cab, lounge, guest room, restaurant, etc. one by one. Of course, given the limited available area inside the airship, the level of luxury is definitely not as good as that of a cruise ship, but everyone watched it with gusto. Everyone. The aviation industry has great potential in the future, and Alitalia will definitely be the leader. After everyone had finished visiting, Armin began to make a summary. That's not necessarily true. Won't others enter this industry? Someone expressed an objection point faced with these words. Armin said with a smile, it is possible to enter. The aviation industry is not monopolized by Alitalia. However, the other party needs to meet a condition and needs a new airship manufacturer. As far as I know, the Zeppelin airship manufacturing factory is currently fully booked with orders, which will last at least 2 years. There is no way to build rigid airships for others. Secondly, we need Alitalia to no longer provide orders to them, because we Alitalia have priority in construction. Armin's words made anyone who had the intention to interfere immediately stop some of their inner thoughts. There is a reason for Alitalia's priority. Before the successful construction of Zeppelin's first airship, a sponsorship from Savoy helped it a lot. After the invention of the rigid airship was successful, Alitalia, which had investment from Savoy, placed a large order with the Zeppelin Airship Company. Under various circumstances, His Excellency Count Zeppelin gave Alitalia priority in view of Italy's help. The people Armin invited this time were all carefully selected, and they are all able to provide Alitalia with various conveniences in the future. Whether it is in terms of financing or opening of routes. In addition to Armin personally leading the team to visit the Swan, there is also an endless stream of people coming to the airport to watch the Swan airship in the past few days. Due to the snow-white appearance of the Swan airship, many people also call it the White Swan. The White Swan did not stay in Rome for long. After careful maintenance, the Swan left with 12 passengers and 7 tons of cargo under the attention of the Roman people. Its next stop was Paris, the capital of France. Chapter 525 The Shock of the White Swan. New York is the financial center of the United States, as well as the largest port and transportation hub. Every day, countless people rush to New York with dreams in mind, and of course, countless people leave New York in despair with their dreams shattered. As a metropolis in the United States, the people of New York are also well informed. No matter what new gadgets they are quickly familiar with them. Nothing can surprise the people of New York. But today, the situation was a little different. People on the streets of New York raised their heads and looked at the big guy in the sky with surprise. Is this the airship the newspaper said about? This is really big. It's bigger and longer than any giant ship on the sea. It's so big and can actually fly in the sky. It's simply a masterpiece of God. On the skyscrapers of Manhattan, well-informed wealthy people are also observing this big guy in the sky. This is the Swan that flew from Europe. It's so white, no wonder it's called the White Swan. I feel that the aviation industry definitely has development potential in the future. Is Hawkins interested in working with me? How about each of us investing $5 million regarding this big guy that appeared in the sky over New York City? Major newspapers also rushed out, and photographers occupied the best positions, trying to take the best photo. One of the photos taken from the life insurance building in Manhattan has become the best symbol of the White Swan's visit to New York. In the photo, the huge airship blocks out the sky and the sun, and the small city buildings below show the domineering power of the airship. When the people of New York paid attention to the Swan, the people on the Swan also looked at the bustling New York City below. Even if some of the passengers were born in New York, watching it from high altitude is still unique. This is New York. It looks prosperous. Yes, this is New York. The Swan didn't stay over New York for long. Half an hour later, it rushed to LaGuardia in the suburbs, where the airship parking lot set up by Alitalia in New York was. The huge airship slowly landed, and the parking lot was also filled with people. They also wanted to see this big guy, so they sold tickets at the parking lot, allowing them to observe the huge Swan airship up close and feel the shock of the world's largest industrial crystallization point among these visitors. There were also people with other purposes, and Major Brad was one of them. Unlike other viewers, Major Brad was also shocked by the huge Swan airship. But unlike others who were simply shocked and said a few words of praise, Major Brad had other ideas, so when he returned to his residence after the visit, he immediately took out a pen and paper and prepared to write down some ideas in his mind and report to his superiors. Dear General Allison, here I need to report to you an epoch-making technological product, the Swan airship. In this report, Major Brad was very worried about this giant airship that could cross the ocean. For this reason, he wrote in the report, if the enemy uses a giant airship as an attack weapon, it will be more aggressive than a battleship. First of all, in terms of speed, the gap between battleships and airships is too big. The airship only takes 4 or 5 days can cross the Atlantic. Secondly, airships can perform tasks regardless of the terrain, so building the United States' own airship force has become an urgent military task. In addition, according to reliable news from Europe, European countries are preparing to start. The United States of America must not fall behind in building its own airship force. Major Brad's information was not well informed. The news that European powers were developing their own airships had actually begun when Alitalia used airships to transport passengers and cargo. However, due to technical difficulties and discussions on the applicability of airships, the speed was not very fast. But after the news came that the giant airship Swan was sailing around the world, the speed of developing airships in various countries accelerated. Yes, the most difficult thing in the aviation industry at present is the development of airships. In the future, the development of mainstream aircraft in the aviation industry will be much easier than airships. At present, people from every powerful country have manufactured their own aircraft. Although this gadget that can fly 30 or 40 kilometers has attracted the attention of various countries, it is not very practical. On the contrary, airships have attracted more attention from various countries due to their load capacity and applicability. But so far, apart from the Zeppelin company, only Italy, which has received its technical support, has successfully built a rigid airship. Even the British Empire, the world's #1, is still intensifying the development of its first airship, and it is expected that it will not be launched for the first time until the end of the year. From here we can see how difficult it is to manufacture a rigid airship. But no matter how difficult it is, I believe that all major industrial countries can develop rigid airships. It is just a matter of time. Major Brad's report is to describe the military role of airships to the US military, and this report is basically read within the military. As for the public, the Swan airship became the front page headlines of major newspapers in New York and even the United States the next day. Among the news published in various newspapers, the most outstanding one was the New York Times, which published an airship travel diary written by a novelist. Speaking of which, the novelist Havel is also quite colorful. He is an author who loves flying and has flown on an airship before. During this round-the-world voyage of the Swan, Havel spent most of his wealth to grab a ticket from the rich and powerful from various countries, and he was also the only ordinary person on the round-the-world voyage of the Swan airship. The identity of this ordinary person needs quotation marks. It is compared with other passengers on the airship. In fact, he should be considered a wealthy class, otherwise he would not be able to spend so much money to buy tickets. And Havel, who had spent most of his worth to buy the ticket, certainly did not miss the opportunity to find a replacement. Before boarding the Swan, he had reached an agreement with 8 newspapers and 1 publishing house. He will record the entire process of the Swan's global journey, and they will be responsible for reporting and publishing. And Havel also received almost enough remuneration from it, so he really deserves to have business acumen. And Havel's ability to receive such compensation has a lot to do with the passengers this time. As the first round-the-world flight by air, it naturally attracted a lot of attention. After all, air flight has always been the hope of mankind. Even though there have been airplanes and airships before, Flying around the earth has never been done before. Most of these passengers are either rich or noble. Not many of them are willing to write reports about their travel experiences. Even if they have writing skills, they are not as good as him. It can be said that he is an exclusive report point. With such an advantage, it is only right to receive a hefty reward point. While New York is reporting on the Swan has started sailing again after a day of repairs. Its next stop is San Francisco, the largest city in the West. The next trip across the North American continent will give passengers bring new experiences. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.